Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto get little sister in Seikirei and Harem? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Though support and follow the Noodlehammer for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Stared ahead morosely, her thoughts just going around in random circles. She was cold, dressed as she was in nothing but panties and a bloodied lab coat, but felt no particular impulse to go anywhere warmer. Her butt also felt sore from sitting on the hard park bench for so long, but she couldn't be bothered to move. What was the point? She had escaped from the labs after the incompetent MBI adjuster had caused her to become incapable of winging, but for what? At the time she'd just run out of fear and instinct, but once that had passed she had lost the will to move. Without the ability to have an ashikabi, she had no purpose and no reason to go find food, shelter or warm clothing. So she kept on sitting the cold, hard bench as she had been doing for the past several hours, despite the protests of her body. She didn't want to die, but as a scrap number, she had no reason to exist. Nobody would want a broken Seikirei after all. What happened to you to make you so sad? A deep voice with a distinct sub-vocal growl to it asked a lot more gently than you would expect such a voice to be capable of. Akitsu blinked sleepily and looked towards the speaker that had somehow crept up on her without her noticing, though she hadn't really been paying attention either. A big man, much bigger than her and full of muscle that was easily visible thanks to his open haori and lack of shirt. A mane of bright golden hair fell down to his waist, and the hilt of a sword was visible over his shoulder. Those were far from being his most distinct features though. No, that honor definitely belonged to the horns on his head and the fiery color of his slitted eyes, which were oddly compassionate in spite of their predatory look. The people that were responsible for giving the Seikirei a basic education only made passing mentions of religion. Consequently, the demonic appearance of the man meant nothing to her. Having no reason to refuse answering him, she spoke in her usual halting way. Broken. Scrap number. I can't be winged. Turning her eyes away, she expected that the odd man would leave now. She knew that most humans wouldn't know what that meant, but her limited exposure to the species had told her that they tended to be rather self-absorbed. She'd never seen a human that looked like that, but didn't care enough to think too hard about it either. No matter if the man was human or not, her problem still stood. Well, that doesn't mean a damn thing to me. She heard him saying with some amusement in his voice. A brief fur of irritation welled up in her before being drowned out by depression. She just didn't have it in her right now to muster any anger over being laughed at. Would you like to come with me? You look like you could use some food and a bath. I won't hurt you, I promise. The sincere tone and offer caused her to look up at him again, though her depressed, sleepy expression still didn't change. You want me? She asked quietly, just the faint tinge of disbelieving hope in the words. I'd like to take care of you. He answered honestly. Normally he might have made a joke about the suggestive-sounding words, but even he could tell that this was a bad time. The depression that was practically rolling off the girl was enough of a clue on that count. Do you want me to take you away from here? Ah yes. Akitsu agreed hesitantly, desperately hoping that she could find a place where she was wanted even if she couldn't be winged. Alright then, let's get you out of here. She accepted the offered arm without hesitation and tried to stand, only for her legs to decided that they didn't want to cooperate, now that she'd spent an unknown number of hours sitting on the cold and uncomfortable bench. A strong hand caught her before she could stumble, and she felt herself being lifted up into his arms before she managed to right herself. Easy there, looks like you won't be doing any walking just yet. Her still unnamed benefactor said soothingly and held her close to his chest. A tinge of pink spread across her cheeks at how warm he was and how nice it felt to be held like that before a spike of fear welled up in her. Ah sorry. She apologized shamefully, afraid that she would be abandoned already for being a burden. Don't be sorry, I was just looking for an excuse to carry you anyway. He teased gently. Her cheeks pinked again and she settled against his chest more easily. She remembered some vague warning being told to her about not trusting suspicious-looking men, especially at night, but she honestly couldn't care about that now. The soft and warm blanket settled on her and was wrapped around her, causing her to blink in confusion. She didn't remember seeing any blankets being carried. Her thoughts on the puzzle were interrupted the rumble of her stomach. Sorry. She muttered again, trying to hide her face. She'd only had someone that wanted her for 2 minutes and she was being nothing but trouble. His only response was a deep chuckle. Don't worry sweetie, we'll get you something to eat soon. Ah sweetie. She muttered to herself very quietly with her blush deepening slightly. I never got your name, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. He said, clearly more of a question than a statement. Akitsu blinked slowly again before speaking. Ah Akitsu, Seikirei number 07, now yours Naruto-sama. Privately, she relished speaking the words. So maybe she couldn't be winged, but this man wanted her and had been very kind, so she would do everything in her power to obey his orders and keep him safe. In this way, maybe she would find some purpose for herself. I have no idea what any of that means aside from the fact that your name is Akitsu, he commented with amusement. But you would make me very happy if you called me Ani-chan. But Naruto hadn't honestly cared about that too much. What he was interested in was seeing if any of those chakra signatures were girls in need of a big brother. With this in mind, he'd zeroed in on the one that was emanating the greatest amount of emotional pain. Akitsu was quite something, that much he could tell already. She was clearly in a deep state of depression when he'd found her, but she seemed to be feeling a lot better already, just because he'd come to talk to her and asked her to come with him. Actually, it was rather worrying how easily she had agreed to go with a complete stranger, especially one that looked like him. What if some worthless scumbag had approached her before he could? Naruto had to admit that Akitsu was definitely a very beautiful woman. Not to mention that he hadn't seen a pair of natural, that big since Tsunade. Or maybe Hinata. Or Samui for that matter, and that marking on her forehead looked quite exotic. He'd need to ask her about that one later, as well as what the hell a Seikirei and Ashikabi was. He could tell that it wasn't a tattoo, as it was somehow connected to the distinctly artificial feeling chakra core in her body. The very fact that all of her chakras seemed to be focused into some kind of orb inside her chest was strange enough, but he would discuss that with Xana later. Seeing that his passenger was about to fall asleep, Naruto took a shortcut and teleported up to the penthouse. He'd been enjoying the walk, but he didn't want her falling asleep before she got a bath and something to eat. Found one already? A distinctly female voice woke Akitsu from her slight doze, and she looked around with sleepy curiosity at where her new master had brought her. It was a spacious bathroom that fairly oozed decadent wealth, with its dominant feature being the large jacuzzi-style bathtub that already had an occupant. The woman was as distinctive as Naruto with her shining white hair, slitted red eyes and horns. No doubt she was the one that had spoken, as she was now scrutinizing Akitsu with her intense gaze. The words themselves confused her though. Had her new master been looking for a Seikirei? That would make the most sense, if not for the fact that he didn't seem to know anything about Seikirei or the Seikirei plan. Yeah, she looked like she needed someone to take care of her. Naruto confirmed and used one claw to cut off Akitsu's panties, without bothering to ask for permission. He'd get her some new ones tomorrow. Akitsu, this is my wife, Xana. He told her while removing the lab coat she was wearing, still without a single protest being sounded by the girl in his arms, much to Naruto's confusion. Usually if he'd done something like that, the woman in question would be screaming bloody murder long before now. Hello. She said quietly, instantly classifying the white-haired woman as someone to be obeyed right after Naruto. Once she was completely, he lowered her towards the water and was much amused when she jerked away as soon as her feet touched the water. Ah, hot. Want me to cool it down a bit for you? He asked with a grin. Instead of answering, Akitsu dipped her toes into the water again and used her power over ice to cool the water down to a more manageable temperature. Oh? You have power over ice? Xana asked mostly rhetorically, having felt the distinct use of that element just now. These artificial chakra cores were quite the interesting things. Perhaps this would be more than just a universe where Naruto could get himself a few little sisters. Not much more, but she intended to investigate how this could possibly have come about. Yes, I am the Seikirei of Ice. Akitsu said with a small nod of her head, now submerged in the water nearly up to her nose. She could already feel the water warming up as another power was used to heat it. She made no protest despite the small discomfort it brought her. It would pass once she got used to it anyway, and it wasn't worth mentioning. Xana filed away that word for later. The girl was clearly exhausted and hungry, and there was no need to badger her with that now. It wasn't as if there was any kind of rush. Naruto entered the hot tub himself, paying no mind to the heat as he put an arm around his wife and another around his newly adopted little sister. Feeling better, Akitsu? Yes, master. The quiet response got an incredulous look from Naruto and a very amused one from Xana. Husband, I thought you went out looking for a little sister, not a slave. I did. Naruto answered, trying to figure out how exactly this had happened. Had Akitsu seriously just been sitting there, waiting for someone to come along and take her with them with the expectation that she would become their slave? Nah, it couldn't be. That was just too absurd. Akitsu, you aren't a slave, I brought you here because I wanted to help you. Do you understand? He asked carefully. Yes. She replied with a short nod. It made her happy that he cared so much, but she still considered him her master. She didn't want to be told to leave after he was done helping her. She would have to do her very best so that she didn't get sent away. Well, now that that's settled, massage my feet while we wait for room service, husband. Xana said, moving away and plopping her feet on Naruto's lap. Privately, she was rather amused by the situation Naruto had gotten himself into just now, and she very much doubted that it had been settled just like that. This had all sorts of potential for some laughs. "Yes, dear," Naruto said in amusement, grinning as he started working on her feet. He knew that Xana liked it when he massaged her feet, and he certainly had no problem doing it. Akitsu blinked slowly as she watched her self-chosen master getting told to do something by his wife. Perhaps Xana should be obeyed above all others if she could tell her master what to do. So confusing, she would need to watch carefully to figure this out. Akitsu wasn't much of a talker, but she had always been very perceptive. She would figure it out. Hours later, Naruto and Xana were spooning in their ridiculously huge bed after the usual that they constantly engaged in. They'd blocked the sound to make sure they didn't wake up Akitsu, that girl needed a rest. "I'm sure you've noticed that your new slave girl has an artificial chakra core," Xana said conversationally. "She's not my slave," Naruto said with an eye roll. "But yes, I have noticed. I find myself curious as to how exactly someone managed that feat. The ability to do something like this is no small matter, even if it appears limited to a single power if Akitsu is any kind of measuring stick. She did say something about being broken, but I was going to wait until tomorrow to ask her about that," Naruto admitted. "Not to mention the Seikirei thing that she claims to be," Xana added. "Yeah, that too," Naruto agreed. "She says it as if it's her race, but she seems human to me. A human with the energy of her body and spirit twisted very strangely, but human all the same." "Well, time enough for that tomorrow," Xana said carelessly and pressed herself back against him, just enjoying the feeling of being held. "Cuddle time now." Naruto rumbled a wordless agreement into her ear and held tighter. He'd never say no to a cuddle. Akitsu woke up just as the first light of dawn began to light up the day and jerked slightly in fright as she didn't recognize where she was for a moment. Her memory cleared soon enough and she remembered being taken in by her kind new master. The thought brought a tiny little smile to her face before it smoothed back into its usual sleepy look. She looked around the room. She was in idle curiosity, having apparently fallen asleep soon after eating as her exhaustion caught up to her. It was a very big room, with obviously expensive furniture that was worlds better than what she was used to seeing in the MBI labs. The only thing she didn't like about the room was the fact that it obviously wasn't her master's. There had been a quiet hope in her mind that she would have been allowed to sleep next to him. Looking down at herself, she discovered that she was wearing a set of white PJs made of high-quality silk. The way that it slid across her bare was rather distractingly arousing actually, and it made her cheeks go pink as she imagined her master touching them. Still with that thought in mind, she very quietly padded over to what she guessed was the master bedroom and silently opened the door just a crack. What she saw made her bite her lip in envy. Her master was tightly and lovingly spooning his wife. She wished with all her heart that she could be the one to be there or that she could join them. But she didn't know if either of them would mind if she just invited herself to their bed. It had not been hard to see that her master valued Xana above all else, and she him. She didn't want to do anything to make either of them angry at her. In fact, it would probably be for the best if she just considered Xana her mistress as well. It would clear up confusion at least. "Ah. Lucky," she murmured to herself with a tiny smile. It would be almost like having two ashikabi. Feeling a bit more cheered up, she placed herself in front of the door and stood guard. She would show them that she was worth keeping. Xana opened a single crimson eye and assessed the situation. Naruto was spooning her and she was feeling very comfortable. Another benefit of not needing to dispose of waste, you never needed to get up from a comfortable position in the morning because of something as silly as a full bladder. Akitsu was standing in front of the door, radiating determination mixed with longing. Without a single thought as to the privacy of the girl's thoughts, she took a peek into her head and couldn't stop a smirk from forming on her face. Not only had Akitsu almost completely disregarded Naruto's assurance that he was not a master, but she had also started thinking of Xana herself as her mistress. She seemed to be under the impression that she would be cast aside if she didn't prove her worth to them. The thought of it almost made her scoff. Naruto never abandoned those he took as his little sisters, they could abandon him though. Though it was blatantly obvious that Akitsu didn't want to be a little sister. The longing was nothing more than a desire to join them in the bed. The ice user was starved for affection of any sort and wanted it desperately. She also got some vague impressions of what the Seikirei business was about, but didn't pry too far into that. Akitsu could explain it herself once they woke up. An idea started taking shape in her mind, an idea that might be worth quite a few laughs. Most of them at Naruto's expense. Akitsu was still standing guard outside the master bedroom, ignorant of the fact that those within didn't need protecting, when her vigil was disturbed. "Come into the room, Akitsu." Akitsu blinked to herself in puzzlement. While she was still somewhat tired, she hadn't thought it was bad enough that she would be hearing voices in her head. True, she really did want to join her master and mistress in the bed, but it would be foolish to risk their anger by doing so without invitation. This hallucination of her mistress's voice asking her to enter the room was just too good to be true, so she didn't listen to it. Besides, despite the chance of enemy Ashikabi attacking here being small, it was not zero, so she would stay watchful. You are not hallucinating, Akitsu, and we are both much stronger than you. We don't need protecting. This time, the voice in her head was full of exasperated amusement that made Akitsu's cheeks go pink. Ah, mistress? She asked tentatively, wanting to confirm that she was indeed being spoken to by her mistress and not hallucinating. Yes, Akitsu, I really am speaking to you, and I note that you still haven't done as I told you. Zana replied pointedly. Akitsu hastened to obey now that it was established that she was not in fact hallucinating, fearing that she had irritated her new mistress with a delay. Despite her haste, she still entered the room with her customary silence. She had never liked making noise when she moved or spoke, which naturally made all of her actions silent and deliberate. Once she was inside the room she shuffled uncertainly, not knowing what to do next. They both seemed to be sleeping, though it was obvious that Zana at least was awake. Join me on the bed. That is what you wanted, isn't it? Zana's mental voice came again. Akitsu's face didn't budge the slightest bit, but inwardly she was jumping for joy and did as she was told without hesitation. After some very careful positioning so that Naruto didn't wake up, she ended up being spooned by the significantly taller woman, and her face developed a happy glow once she was settled. She was curious about the obvious power displayed by Zana just now, but didn't ask. It wasn't her place to ask questions. The only thing she cared about was the fact that neither of her two new masters were Seikirei, and that she belonged to someone. Stay quiet for me, Akitsu, we wouldn't want to wake up Naruto now, would we? Zana murmured into her mind and slid her right hand under the top half of Akitsu's PJs, resting it just beneath her. Already obeying, Akitsu just nodded her head without speaking, though she did twitch and let out a tiny gasp at the touch. Her resolve to keep silent was tested when she suddenly felt herself being engulfed by a power so vast that she could feel no end to it. It swamped her utterly, making her feel completely insignificant, and she understood what Zana had meant when she said that they didn't need her protection. Even the fearsome black Seikirei Kerasuba was nothing to them. Many would have felt terrified by this realization, but not Akitsu. She felt nothing but happiness that she had been found and claimed by someone so powerful. They had no need of her, but she had been chosen anyway. Anything that she could do, they could do better. That did much to allay her fears of being discarded, though she still intended to do her best so as not to waste this opportunity. Additionally, being completely drowned in the vast power of her new mistress also felt incredibly good. Especially so because of Akitsu's particular submissive kink, though she had never thought of it that way. On Zana's end, she was well aware of Akitsu's skyrocketing arousal and quite amused by it, but it was not why she had done this. She was doing this because she was interested in the artificial chakra core and wanted to examine it, as well as making the first step of her little prank on Naruto. It was a curious thing to be sure. The energy of her body was being concentrated inside her and then given shape by her spirit, no doubt focusing and locking it into control over the ice element. She had never even considered doing something so ass backwards before, and it was quite clear that this was more likely done through technology rather than being chakra manipulation by a superior being such as herself or Naruto. That was actually rather impressive in its own right, even though it was crude and inflexible. The bodies of these Seikirei were generally more durable than the average shinobi, but they were locked to the use of a single ability. Curiously enough, Akitsu's core seemed damaged somehow, which she figured tied into her claim of being broken. No longer willing to wait for an explanation now that she had the girl in her clutches already, she rummaged around in her head until she found the answer she sought. Ah, so this inability to be winged is why you claim to be broken. Zana muttered mentally to herself. Akitsu heard it too, but was in no state to respond, busy as she was trying to hold back of. She felt that she could fix the damage, but didn't want to attempt it without seeing a normal Seikirei core as it was called, up close. A rather ostentatious name for a chakra core in her opinion, but it was of no concern to her. She would seek out another Seikirei later and examine their core to see the difference, probably more than one for the sake of comparison. Finished with her examination, she withdrew and discovered that Akitsu was desperately trying to keep still and quiet as she had been told to do. This was made difficult by her heavy breathing and her body all but burning in arousal. It was hard for her to resist grinding against Zana in a wordless plea for more. "Oh, you like that, did you?" She purred into her ear and grabbed onto one of Akitsu's, pulling and pinching it ever so slightly. Akitsu swallowed heavily and nodded jerkily, forcing down the mule of that wanted to crawl out of her throat. "You must be aching for more." Zana continued sensually, sliding her hand down Akitsu's stomach and stopping to scratch at the dark brown fuzz of hair just above her entrance. Akitsu panted and was about to answer when a growl from the still sleeping Naruto made her freeze, fearing that she had failed her mistress by waking him. Much to her relief, he settled back into sleep. Xana was amused by the whole thing, knowing that it would take more than that to wake up her husband, who slept like a log, despite both his teachers repeatedly telling him that shinobi should be light sleepers. 10 years spent in isolation had only made that trait more prominent. Naruto never was a very good shinobi. Powerful to be sure, but shock trooper was a far more apt description of his combat style. Well, if you want more, then here is what you do. Xana began explaining while simultaneously lightly rubbing Akitsu's groin, just enough to make her arousal even stronger, without giving her an orgasm. Do you understand? She asked a few minutes later and removed her hand. Yes, mistress. Akitsu answered breathlessly, her groin sopping wet and feeling like it was on fire. Good, now clean up this mess you left on my hand. Xana said in satisfaction and placed her hand, which was now sticky from Akitsu's arousal, in front of the Sekirei's mouth. Akitsu didn't hesitate to starting it clean for even a moment. She was so happy with who her master and mistress were that even her inability to be winged didn't hurt as much as it used to. An approving sound rumbled from Naruto's throat as a pair of soft paid attention to one of his still half asleep. He grabbed the owner of said by the butt and pressed her body down on his already rock-hard erection, eliciting a gasp as her slit was rubbed along it lengthwise. He frowned slightly, finding that gasp to be rather unfamiliar. Come to think of it, the ass he was fondling wasn't as firm as it was supposed to be, and the squashed into his chest were too big. Additionally, the teeth weren't sharp enough, and if he didn't miss his guess, there was a lot of missing hides. Opening his eyes, he was greeted by Akitsu's perpetually sleepy expression, while she continued to nibble on his. Good morning, master. Akitsu greeted briefly and fed her tongue over the again. Akitsu. He greeted back, not too perturbed to find her lying on top of him. Didn't I tell you that I wasn't your master? Akitsu was a bad girl. The Seikirei said and continued in a hopeful tone. Spank me. Naruto couldn't help laughing at that and proceeded to slap her butt lightly, drawing a distinctly D-sounding yelp from her. What are you doing on top of me? He asked mildly. Akitsu stifled the urge to scramble off him and give an apology. Xana had told her that she didn't need to be afraid of abandonment and that Naruto wouldn't be angry at her for doing this. His good-natured reaction so far confirmed that and gave her the courage to continue. Rubbing myself against master's body makes me happy. She emphasized this by sliding her sopping wet entrance slowly over his member. Is that so? Naruto asked in bemusement. I'm guessing that you don't really want to be my little sister. Master likes incest. She asked, seemingly in realization, though it was hard to tell when her expression barely changed. Please be gentle with me, Ani-chan. Naruto chuckled again and pushed down on her butt, coincidentally also pushing her more firmly down on his member. I'm getting the feeling that my dear wife put you up to this. Akitsu let out but managed to answer. Mistress helped. Mistress huh? Naruto said musingly. Is this really what you want? Yes, please take good care of me, master. She answered almost shyly, picking up on the fact that it was an important question. Well, I certainly wasn't expecting to end up in this kind of situation when we came here yesterday. He muttered to himself, voice heavy with irony. Please don't reject me. Akitsu pleaded with quiet desperation, her courage leaving her at the prospect. She couldn't go back to being the scrap number, not after feeling wanted for even a short while. Naruto sighed with amused resignation and gave the girl a hug. Don't worry, Akitsu, I'm not going to reject you. You'll have a place with me and Xana for as long as you wanted. Akitsu returned the hug, sighing happily. Less than half a minute later she started fidgeting and rubbing her still aching womanhood over his member again. Rip open my virgin pussy, master. Naruto gave the Seikirei an odd look before figuring out where that had come from. Xana told you to say that, didn't she? Akitsu's expression didn't change, but Naruto could clearly feel that she was embarrassed as she nodded. Obviously not something that she would have said on her own. Strangely enough, you're the first virgin I'm going to have with. You're a special girl, Akitsu. He said teasingly. I'm special. She said to herself, flushing with Akitsu decided that she liked being special. Any further thought on the subject was interrupted when he rolled them over so that he was on top. Akitsu gasped in both surprise and the sense of restrained power pressing down on her was both comforting and arousing to the Seikirei. Comforting because she knew that she belonged to the owner of this power now and arousing because she simply liked the idea of her master being stronger than her. Another, far more drawn-out gasp escaped her throat when she felt him slowly begin to penetrate her. She was more than ready, so there was no pain, only a wonderful feeling of being stretched and filled. Now let's take care of that pesky virginity of yours. He murmured into her ear and pushed further inside. Akitsu felt only a brief flare of pain before a curious numbness smothered it. After that, there was only and she loved every moment of it. Naruto Manaka was feeling undecisive. A very odd state of mind for him and one that he didn't like. His feeling of indecision was entirely due to the two unexpected new arrivals in his city. He wasn't stupid enough to think that the horned man and woman were just eccentric rich cosplayers like most people, but he couldn't for the life of them figure out what they really were. They had just appeared in Shinto-Tito literally out of nowhere and moved into the penthouse of the most expensive hotel in the city. That had been more than enough to capture his interest, but the fact that the male of the two, Uzumaki Naruto, had made a beeline for number 07 solidified it. Not that the name helped him at all, since there was absolutely no information that would indicate the existence of such a man. The only reason he even knew the horned man's name was because he'd used it to sign into the hotel, but the fact that he'd gone and picked up the scrap number was a point of some concern. His plan for the broken Seikirei had been to let that brat of an Ashikabi in the south get her, fully expecting the depressed and dependent Akitsu to latch onto the first person to show any interest in her. She was meant to be an unwingable wildcard that would make the game more interesting. Well, he'd gotten his wildcard alright, but it was a bit more wild than he'd anticipated. This complete unknown now had possession of the scrap number and no normal Seikirei to make him a true contender in the Seikirei plan. And that wasn't even accounting for his complete lack of intelligence on the demonic-looking duo. For all he knew, they were another pair of aliens with superhuman powers. His indecision was based on the fact that he didn't know if he should contact them in order to explain the rules of the Seikirei plan, or if he should just let them do whatever they wanted until one of them acquired a normal Seikirei. In the end he decided that it would be better to contact them immediately, since they'd likely get another, normal Seikirei soon enough. Besides, what was a game without some unknowns? Haha, I'm gonna get you Akitsu. Naruto crowed triumphantly, grinning all the while. Oh no. Akitsu denied quietly but firmly, her sleepy expression replaced by one of intense focus as she stared at the large TV mounted on the wall, fingers furiously manipulating the controller in her hand with superhuman speed. She was still dressed in the very comfortable silk PJs, but would be getting some new clothing soon. Anna watched in amusement as the two of them played the latest Mortal Kombat game on the latest gaming console which Naruto had stolen in some other corner of the world recently. They'd been at it ever since finishing off breakfast, which had been a couple of hours ago now. She'd have to try this herself later, it looked as if it might be interesting. This dimension seemed to be approximately 20 years chronologically ahead of the previous one, and Naruto had spared little time in investigating how the gaming industry had progressed, having taken an interest in it before they left. He'd also wasted no time in challenging Akitsu to a battle after setting the whole thing up. The shy-eye Seikirei had been hesitant at first, but had gotten into it quickly enough and was now giving it her all to beat her self-chosen master at the game. They'd been at it for a couple of hours already, and there was a small pile of crushed and frozen controllers nearby, a silent testament to the fact that they hadn't been made for people with superpowers. Naruto had solidly dominated the battles at first, as Akitsu was both more unfamiliar with it and seemed to think that she should be letting her master win. That had changed once she'd gotten used to it, and Xana had encouraged her to do her best. Honestly, the way that those people in MBI had systematically destroyed Akitsu's self-worth was monstrous, and she knew that Naruto would decide to murder them all as soon as he found out. But to return to the game, Akitsu had started actually winning lately, though that was probably mostly because she refused to play any character aside from Sub-Zero, while Naruto liked to switch between them a lot. It gave her the edge of being more familiar with her chosen character. Naruto was at this point growling to himself in focus as he tried desperately to out-maneuver Akitsu's skilled use of Sub-Zero's freezing powers. He finally managed it and was in a perfect position to execute a punishing combo move that would end with Akitsu's defeat, followed by a spectacular fatality finish. And then suddenly their fight was interrupted as the screen changed to show a white-haired man with a ridiculous hairstyle, wearing glasses and dressed in a rather pompous-looking white cloak over a white suit. Greetings Uzumaki Naruto-san and welcome to the Seikirei plan. Naruto leaned back on the couch, throwing his crushed controller on the pile of previously crushed ones, and spoke with a very even voice. You just interrupted my epic finishing move, the epic finishing move that I've been trying to pull off for the past half hour. Inhaling deeply in a way that most people would understand was a sign of deep irritation, he spoke again. So, who the hell are you and what do you want? Manaka blinked in surprise at the response but plowed onward. I am Hiroto Manaka, president of MBI, game master of the Seikirei plan, and I am here to explain to you the rules of the game you've entered. Alright, I'll pretend to care about your rules for a few minutes, but first, why don't you explain to me how you know my name and how you're talking to me through the TV? As the president of MBI, I know everything that goes on in Shinto-Tito, and I can connect to any electronic device. Manaka boasted grandly. But you Uzumaki-san, you and your companion are a mystery. Appearing out of nowhere like that and setting up Basicum practically in the middle of the city, apparently having knowledge of the Seikirei if your decision to immediately approach Akitsu is any clue. I am quite impressed by your boldness and curious as to your origins and would like to invite you to a meeting in the MBI tower for this discussion. I am certain that someone of your obvious wealth would prefer. Oh yes, you dirty bitch. Work the shaft. Naruto interrupted Lai, having gotten fed up with this moron's blabbering. Excuse me? Manaka asked, blinking in confusion at the interruption. Oh, never mind me. I just like to dirty talk when someone is sucking my dick. Naruto explained with a placid smile. Right, perhaps I should just skip to the point. Manaka said, regaining his composure. Eccentric he might be, but slow on the uptake he was not. Clearly, Uzumaki Naruto was not the type to appreciate politeness. Might be a good idea. Naruto agreed. I would like you to come meet me in my office so that I can explain to you the intricacies of the Seikirei plan in a more comfortable setting. And I would have liked to finish my game with Akitsu without being interrupted, but this stupid-looking, self-entitled little shitston decided that he needed to make a grand appearance on our TV just as I was about to execute a flawless combo move. Naruto retorted, doing his best imitation of Xana's most condescending tone. Alright then. I'll just explain it now. Manaka said, containing his annoyance with some difficulty. He had no idea what he was dealing with here and didn't want to make any rash moves, but Uzumaki was proving to be inordinately good at pissing people off. Even though she is a scrap number, now that you've claimed Akitsu, you are part of the Seikirei plan and it is expected of you to keep it secret or face retaliation from MBI. And what exactly gave you the idea that Akitsu belongs to him? Xana interrupted with cool disdain. Well, he was the one to pick her up from the park, wasn't he? Manaka asked in confusion. Come here, Akitsu. Xana said to the Seikirei, without the disdain she'd showed for the MBI CEO. Yes, mistress. Akitsu said immediately and obediently sat at Xana's feet, leaning her head back, and when the horn goddess gently scratched her scalp. Ah, I see. Manaka said with a tone of realization, figuring that the woman was the one in control. May I have your name, miss? You may not even the dirt under my feet, insect, much less have my name, was the derisive response. Manaka had to struggle hard now to keep his temper in check. He'd never met a pair of people quite so infuriating before. One was crass, rude and insulting, while the other was intolerably arrogant and insulting. Akitsu, you don't happen to know how to get this retard to buzz off, do you? I want a rematch on that last fight. Naruto asked the Seikirei, dismissing Manaka completely. No master. She replied, confusing Manaka further. Were the two of them sharing the scrap number between them or something? I guess there's no helping it then, I'll just have to kill him. Naruto said with a flippant shrug. Akitsu was privately glad to see her master and mistress mocking the head of MBI like this and knowing that there was nothing the man could do about it. She'd never liked him or MBI in general. They had been the ones to experiment on her and break her ability to be winged, and she wasn't naive enough to think that Manaka hadn't known about it or even planned for it to happen. If it hadn't been for him, then maybe she could have been a proper Seikirei for them like they deserved instead of a scrap number. There's no need for that, I was just leaving. Manaka butted in, his good humor gone. He didn't believe that they could match the might of Kerasuba, but there was no sense in escalating things that far so early in the game. As long as you respect the rules, I will only contact you to update you on the progress of the Seikirei plan from now on. Don't bother, whatever stupid plan you're talking about stopped mattering when we came into town. As of that point, the only plan that still matters is Naruto's little sister plan. The horned blonde said dismissively. Manaka couldn't help chuckling at that. He'd been laying down the groundwork for the Seikirei plan for decades, and now it was suddenly unimportant just because of a couple of new arrivals. How absurd. I'm afraid you don't understand the severity of the. If you attempt to make another threat, I will rip off your fingers. 1. Bye. 1. Xana interrupted with slow deliberation, her crimson gaze glowing slightly as it bored into the arrogant CEO. In spite of himself, Manaka froze with instinctive terror, his lizard hindbrain warning him of danger that higher brain functions weren't geared to recognize. Right, well, don't tell anyone about the Seikirei plan. After that last nervous statement, he quickly cut the connection and decided that he desperately needed more information on these two. Naruto looked over at where Akitsu was still enjoying the head scratching like a satisfied cat and spoke to her. So, how about that rematch, Akitsu? Ah. Akitsu started but didn't finish, being far too busy with the petting. What, you two chicken? Afraid you'll lose, he teased, privately amused by how distracted the girl was. Xana leaned down to whisper something in Akitsu's ear, making the Seikirei open her eyes and look at Naruto for a few seconds before speaking. Master is too much of a noob for me. Naruto's taken aback look at hearing Akitsu trash talk him made Xana chuckle in amusement. She'd have the girl trained to constantly mock her husband in no time. Xana's eyebrow twitched with irritation as Naruto skipped over yet another song on his recently compiled playlist, for no particularly good reason. He'd long since familiarized himself with the use of computers and was even now downloading anything that happened to interest him, ranging from movies to video games and music. He wasn't going to be hacking anything anytime soon, but he knew enough to do that much. Deciding it was better to simply ignore her husband's antics, she focused on Akitsu instead. The Seikirei was still going around the hotel penthouse wearing nothing but PJs and bathrobes, and Xana had decided that it was past time to make the girl something else to wear. "What kind of clothing would you like to wear, Akitsu?" she asked. Akitsu blinked in apparent surprise at the question before replying. Whatever kind you want me to wear, mistress." Xana sighed slightly, not even managing to feel irritated at the unhelpful response. She really should have expected that. "Akitsu, neither myself nor Naruto want a mindless doll. I want you to think this over and decide for yourself. Ask my idiot husband if you need help using the computer to do research." Alright, so Naruto's constant song skipping may be irritating her slightly more than she had previously thought. "Boy, why am I being called an idiot this time?" Naruto demanded in protest. "Because you constantly keep skipping the songs in your playlist. Why would you even put them in your playlist if you never listen to them?" she retorted. "I don't know, it's like. I know that there are better songs in the playlist and I want to hear those, so I skip the others," Naruto explained. "That makes no sense. If you like some of them better than others, then just remove the ones you don't like." Xana shot down his logic. "It's not that I don't like them, it's just that I like some of them better than others and I don't want to remove them because I want to listen to those too. Then stop skipping them." "I told you already, I'm skipping them because I want to listen to others first," he tried to explain in frustration. "Then simply select those instead of playing a blind lottery with a random shuffling until you get to the one you want." Naruto took a breath to make a counter-argument and then suddenly deflated. "It's just not the same." For just a moment, Xana felt sorely tempted to throw a fireball at her husband's head. What kind of stupid reasoning was that? During this entire byplay, Akitsu had been shuffling nervously and alternating between looking at the ground and glancing at Xana while biting her lip slightly. She was actually trying to muster the courage to say that she liked the way that Xana was dressed and asking for something similar, but wasn't sure if that would be alright. She didn't know much about fashion, but she preferred the more traditional style of Japanese dress as opposed to the modern, Western-influenced one. She also liked the white color, magatama decoration and wide sleeves of Xana's highly customized kimono. Still, both Naruto and Xana had encouraged her to speak her mind and tell them what she wanted, so maybe it would be alright if she asked for something like it. Once she was sure that the good-natured bickering was finished and that she wouldn't be interrupting, she spoke up. Mistress, could I have something similar to yours?" Xana shifted her attention back to Akitsu and frowned thoughtfully. "You like what I'm wearing?" Akitsu nodded, silently relieved to see that the horned woman did not appear offended and waited patiently for her response. Xana considered what she could create for the Seikirei without it being a complete copy of her own clothing style. Somewhat fond of the submissive girl she might be, but she wasn't going to have her walking about in the exact same style of clothing. Aside from the fact that she simply didn't want anyone to be dressed the same as she was, it would also be impractical. Her customized kimono should slide right off her shoulders according to physics, the only reason it didn't was because it was kept in place by her power, but a different style of kimono was certainly not a problem to make. Akitsu remained still as the horned woman inspected her with a contemplative look on her face for a few minutes, fighting down the urge to fidget under the scrutiny. "Here, try this on," Xana finally said and handed her a bundle of white and blue clothing. Without hesitation, Akitsu stepped out of the bathrobe she had been wearing and put on the offered clothing. Or, she tried to at least. She had some trouble figuring out how to tie the obi properly since she'd never worn anything of the sort and needed some help from Xana to do it, but other than that it was not a big deal. Looking at herself in a full-length mirror, Akitsu smiled ever so slightly. It was a very pretty kimono in a blue colors, decorated with white snowflakes and a much deeper blue obi. It showed a good deal of cleavage as her prodigiously large made it impractical and slightly uncomfortable to cover them completely, not to mention that Xana felt that her husband would no doubt appreciate the view. She rather liked it herself, to be completely honest. It was the nicest thing Akitsu had ever worn, but the fact that it had been made specifically for her by Xana was much more important than the beauty and comfort of the garment. "Looking good, Akitsu, it suits you," Naruto complimented with a grin, causing Akitsu's cheeks to go pink. "Of course it suits her, I made it after all," Xana added haughtily. Naruto rolled his eyes at that and smirked. "Of course, because you are a goddess and heaven forbid that anything you do is wrong or substandard." "Don't be ridiculous, husband," she retorted with false derision, hiding a grin at the old running gag. "I am heaven." "Well, I can't argue with that," he said back slyly and blatantly looked her over. Akitsu paid close attention as the air became noticeably oily charged with her two masters, giving off low growls and staring at each other like predators that were about to leap in for the kill. She flinched slightly when they crashed into each other with a violence that she'd never seen from either one before and fretted as she contemplated trying to stop them with her ice powers. Her worry abated once it became obvious that they weren't fighting so much as ripping each other's clothes off and maneuvering towards the bedroom. Now that the worry was gone, however, longing replaced it. Her first experience with had been wonderful, and Naruto had already made sure that she wasn't in any pain from losing her virginity, and she really wanted to join in. If with just one of her masters had been so good, then she could only imagine that it would be even better with both, but once again she wasn't sure if they would be annoyed by her intrusion. "If you ever want to join us, then you will need to show some backbone. If you cannot muster your courage, then you will not be allowed to sleep with Naruto again either." Xana's voice in her mind jolted her out of the miniature funk she'd fallen into and caused her to titter in indecision for a moment before her sleepy expression hardened ever so slightly in resolve. Making her way to the bedroom and opening the door, she immediately saw that Naruto had apparently succeeded in pinning his wife down and was already thrusting into her forcefully. With just a final moment of hesitation, she entered and approached, hoping that they would accept her joining them. Naruto's momentary inattention when he noticed her was all Xana needed to turn the tables and pin him instead. Akitsu didn't even get the chance to mourn the tragic death of her new kimono, as it was shredded before Xana planted her directly on Naruto's face. Akitsu sighed with minor unhappiness at her current situation. She was currently clutching one of Naruto's hands, while Xana slept 3/4 of the way on top of him. That was not at all the cause of her unhappiness, not even close. The problem was that she'd woken up too early, and now her bladder was telling her to get up and empty it, when all she wanted to do was stay there and just bask in the fact that she had a place to belong. Right now, she envied her masters for the fact that they apparently had no need of bathrooms. She'd certainly never seen either of them use one at least. With another quiet sigh, she conceded to the demands of her bladder and padded into the bathroom. Akitsu supposed that she had only herself to blame for getting excited and waking up early, but she hadn't been able to help it. Naruto had suggested taking her to a movie theater since she'd never been to one before, and Xana had agreed to it as long as they brought along sufficient quantities of ice cream. When Naruto had picked her up at that park, Akitsu hadn't expected that they would just be doing things that were so normal. She'd expected guard duty, following orders, Seikirei battles and being used to fulfill her Ashikabi's juvenile fantasy of sleeping with multiple women. Instead of that, she was playing fun video games, getting invited to watch movies, seeing her masters tear the entire Seikirei plan apart just because they had other plans, and she could join in on their bedroom activities if she wanted to and was willing to play by their rules. She certainly had no problems with their rules, it had been lots of fun. Especially the chains, she had really liked those. Maybe she should ask mistress to put some chains on her next kimono. Akitsu contemplated the idea for a minute before shaking her head silently. That would be just tacky. When she returned to the bedroom, she saw that Naruto had laid the arm that she'd been cuddling across Xana's thigh. Akitsu pouted slightly at the fact that she wouldn't be able to hold that arm anymore. After a moment of consideration, she decided to lay down on the other side instead. Carefully moving the mane of beautifully shining white hair, she pressed herself against Xana's back and sighed contently. This was actually even better. Unknown to her, Xana had woken up as soon as her hair had been touched and smirked at how much of a cuddler Akitsu was. Good thing that she didn't sweat, or else being sandwiched between her husband and the Seikirei would have gotten uncomfortable real fast. "Ah, master, I don't understand. Why did he do that?" Akitsu asked quietly. She'd been told to ask if she didn't understand something about the movie, and the actions of the main antagonist just now made no sense to her. Naruto leaned over to explain it to her. He'd figured that she would probably have trouble understanding the movie at certain points due to being unfamiliar with every aspect of technology or certain societal norms. It didn't bother him, and it was interesting to note that she seemed to have a somewhat skewed view of relationships. He'd learned enough during the course of the movie that he was starting to become rather upset with the people at MBI, not to mention suspicious of their motives. On the other side of him, Xana continued to destroy another tub of ice cream at a rate that would make a calorie-obsessed teenager cringe in horror. And then suddenly, he felt the back of his seat being kicked rather rudely. "Hey asshole, some of us are trying to enjoy the movie. Could you shut the hell up? And tell your cosplay girlfriend to stop chewing so loudly." Both Naruto and Xana froze for a moment and then stood up to their full, imposing height to cast immolating glares at the teenager that had just spoken up, no doubt trying to impress the girl next to him. The teen in question along with the girl he was with instantly broke into a cold sweat at the twin glares and tried to sink as far as possible into his seat. The only reason that I haven't ripped your heart out yet is because it would cause a panic and I want to finish this movie, but if you so much as move a muscle again, I will do it. Xana stated in such a matter-of-fact tone that there was no choice but to believe it. The teenager was too scared to even nod, though it would have made no difference since both Naruto and Xana had already sat back down. Meanwhile, Akitsu was silently fuming, though you'd be hard-pressed to notice that due to her lack of expression. How dare that boy kick her master's seat and insult him? And how dare he say that mistress was chewing too loudly? Master was just being kind by explaining things to her and mistress hadn't been eating any louder than dozens of other people with their popcorn. Feeling as if the boy had gotten off too lightly, she indulged in some petty vengeance by lowering the temperature around him by a considerable margin. Soon, the boy was trying to keep control of his shivering and failing at it. He was tempted to simply escape out of the theater, but he was quite honestly too scared to move, fearing that even leaving would constitute as moving a muscle. When the movie ended about 45 minutes later, he and his girlfriend were among the first ones up, though he needed some help moving, since he was suffering the early stages of hypothermia at that point. That was rather mean of you, Akitsu. Xana commented. Good girl. Akitsu blushed slightly, pleased by the compliment. Come on, let's get out of here before she decides to freeze everyone for getting in our way. Naruto teased. Xana was struck with inspiration and started whispering a suggestion into Akitsu's mind before Naruto even finished speaking. She was fairly sure that Akitsu would be the type to go along with it. But master, Xana-sama said I was a good girl. Don't I get a reward? Akitsu asked plaintively after a moment of silence. What kind of reward would you like? Naruto asked bemusedly. Instead of answering, Akitsu stuck her hand into his pants. Oh, I see. He said with a grin at her boldness. Are you sure you want to do it right here? Master? Chicken. Akitsu taunted, though it sounded a bit strange because her tone remained unchanged. Xana couldn't help snickering when she heard Akitsu's best attempt at a taunt. The girl was coming along just fine, but she definitely needed to expand her range of tonal inflection. Naruto gaped at her for a moment and then he started chortling. Akitsu could call him master all she wanted, but he was going to see her becoming a functional and independent person, whether she liked it or not, and this was a good sign. If she still wanted to stick around and play at being his and Xana's slave after that, then she was welcome to do so, but she would be capable of emotional independence, even if it took him years to teach it to her. But that was for the future, right now there was a challenge to be answered. Very well then, if you want it right here, then I'll give it to you right here. Not everyone had left the theater yet, but being the utterly shameless bastard that he was, Naruto didn't give a damn about that as he bent Akitsu over the seat in front of him and hiked up her kimono. It was fortunate that she had the same aversion to underwear as he and Xana, which made things a bit easier. Sir, ma'am. Could you please stop doing that? An incredibly awkward-looking young man who looked as if it was his job to clean the room when everyone left asked, having come into the room shortly after Naruto and Akitsu had gotten started. We'll stop when we're finished. Don't worry, it shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes. Naruto answered over Akitsu's stifling, feeling no shame at all. Xana snickered when his nerve broke and he fled the room with his face practically on fire. Several minutes later, a trio of security guards entered the room, looking just as awkward as the young man from earlier. Both Naruto and Xana smothered a laugh when they overheard them talking about how to approach, catching words such as disgraceful, public indecency and even the moral decay of society. Finally, the oldest of them approached with the other two as backup and addressed Naruto. Though Xana had to wonder what these three thought they could do even if they believed the horns and claws were just cosplay. Naruto was a very big man with obviously powerful muscle definition, and the three of them were just out of shape security guards. I'm going to have to insist that you stop immediately, you're committing a crime, and police are already on their way. He said firmly. Privately, he was wondering how the hell this man even managed to get into the theater dressed like that. The more you bother them, the longer it's going to take. Xana pointed out reasonably. How do you expect him to finish in time for the police to get here if he has to keep talking to a flabby, balding middle-aged man? There's no need for insults, ma'am. The aforementioned middle-aged security guard said back, suppressing the urge to self-consciously suck in his gut and run a hand over his receding hairline. Do I look like a ma'am to you? Xana demanded. No, was the nervous answer from the suddenly scared security guard. He had no idea what it was, but something was telling him that this horned woman was even more dangerous than the horned man, not to mention that at close range, those horns and fangs didn't look fake at all, and the eyes looked much too real to be contacts. Just leave. Xana sighed. Talking to you is giving me the urge to set someone on fire. She knew that he was just doing his job and not trying to annoy her, but he was annoying her nonetheless. There were days when she missed performing a few random acts of destructive violence as a form of stress relief, but she had worked too hard to get control of herself to go back to taking out her irritation on everything around her. She was not that weak-willed anymore. She'd take her irritation out on Naruto's balls later, that way they could both have fun. Wisely, the 3 security guards decided to do as they were told. Let the police deal with these 3, it wasn't as if they were going anywhere apparently. Just shy of 10 minutes later, Naruto had already shot his load into Akitsu and a team of police officers were entering the room. "Alright, let's go down to the station," the woman in charge said, suppressing a sigh. Why did she get all the crazies? Just the other day, she'd had to answer a call about a couple of young women throwing lightning around on the streets, and now this crazy bunch of foreigners decides that a movie theater was a great place to have. We were just about to go back to our hotel," Naruto replied flippantly. "You committed a crime, so I have to take you down to the station. You can't just pass," the policewoman retorted sarcastically. "Seikirei business police girl, you can direct your complaints and paperwork to Hiroto Manaka," he said back spontaneously, figuring that the police had been informed of the Seikirei and told to stay away from them. "Fine then, just get out and don't do it again," the policewoman bit out with a scowl, confirming Naruto's guess. She hated having to let obvious lawbreakers go, but the crazy MBI president owned most of the city at this point and she knew that she'd lose her job if she meddled with his oh so important plans. And no, she wasn't bitter about that at all. "Ah mistress," Akitsu said quietly with an embarrassed blush and shuffle, drawing everyone's attention. "What is it?" Xana asked curiously. "I'm leaking." 10 minutes later, Naruto was still smirking to himself as they walked back to the hotel. Scandalizing all the prudes just never got old, and it also amused him to think that Manaka was probably going to be receiving a strongly worded complaint from the police about the incident. Akitsu was walking next to him, holding one of his hands. She would have liked to hold both his and Xana's hands, but the horned woman was not much for holding hands in the first place, and she didn't think that they'd let her walk in the middle anyway. What they'd done just now had been strangely exciting for her, despite the slight embarrassment she'd felt when people had started coming to bother them. Maybe next time, they would be able to do something like that without getting caught. She'd have to ask later. Xana was horny and intended to rape her husband as soon as they got back to the hotel. The only reason that she hadn't just teleported all 3 of them back already was because of the distraction that was going to be making itself known any second now. They had been following them ever since the movie theater after all. She'd even made sure that all the people had cleared the street so that they would just get on with it already. Gravity hammer. Naruto cocked his head curiously at the girl that had just tried to swing a truly massive hammer at Akitsu's head, the head of which was now being held still by his hand. It had been swung by a light brown-haired girl in a modest white dress, who was much too small for her chosen weapon, though judging by the feel of her, she was a Seikirei, which would explain it. Akitsu had noticed their tail as well, but had been cautioned to not react to it, so she just moved back a bit to give Naruto some room. "Why is a cute girl like you going around trying to kill her sister?" he asked mildly, more focused on trying to unravel the tangled mess of emotions that he could sense from her than anything else. She felt like a roiling mass of negative emotions that were being kept bottled up by feelings of love and affection for the thuggish-looking guy in the green pullover that was watching from a short distance away. There was something seriously wrong with that, because there was no way that she could possibly be feeling love with that much negativity boiling just under the surface. "I'm Ashikabi as she's a Seikirei," the girl stammered incoherently, now feeling very scared of this man that had been able to block her strongest attack with one hand, as if it was nothing. She barely registered the fact that he'd called the Seikirei with a forehead tattoo her sister. "Mishima, you stupid bitch. Stop talking and kill him." The hollering of the unsavory-looking guy made the now-named Yashima flinch as if she'd been struck. I can't move my hammer, Ashikabi-sama," she said fearfully and tugged on her hammer to no effect. "Worthless slut." He spat derisively, pulling out a small pocket knife and rushing at Naruto with it. Akitsu tensed with the instinctive desire to protect Naruto, but Xana's hand on her shoulder stopped her. Naruto didn't bother moving and kept his chest wide open, knowing exactly what would happen when the idiot tried to stab him. He'd already deduced the situation when the idiot had opened his mouth for the first time, and he wasn't feeling very merciful. The knife hit just off-center on his stomach and, very much contrary to the expectations of Junichi Tanagawa, completely failed to penetrate the skin, causing him to badly sprain his wrist due to the unexpected resistance and his amateurish knife hold. His shout of pain was cut off when a large hand clamped around his jaw like a bear trap and lifted him into the air. "Ashikabi-sama," Yashima exclaimed in worry and looked ready to attack again. "Sleep," Naruto commanded with a short glance at the girl, causing her to slump instantly. "Akitsu, be a dear and pick her up, will you?" "Yes, master," the Seikirei said and immediately did as she was told. But that taken care of, Naruto turned his attention back to the lowlife he was dangling off the ground. Have you ever wondered what it sounds like to hear your own skull cracking? Inichi let out a muffled scream and flailed wildly when the pressure on his jaw was increased to the point where he did indeed hear the bone cracking. Hold on for a moment, husband. Zana spoke and approached the dangling man. Something you wanted to know? Naruto asked curiously, letting up on the pressure much to Jinichi's relief. Indeed. I suspect that you'll be wanting to adopt that girl, so this is as good a time as any to see if I can break the swinging without killing her. She answered and nonchalantly stabbed her hand into the hanging man's guts. About 15 seconds of muffled screaming later, she withdrew it and healed the wound just enough to prevent extensive bleeding. So that's how it works, how perverse. Did you actually need to stab him to find out how it works? Naruto asked amusedly. Of course not, I just felt like stabbing him. Zana replied with a scoff. Naruto snickered, having expected something like that, and once more turned to the recently stabbed man. Now, since you've been following us for quite a while already, I'm guessing that you must have been targeting us specifically. We've never met and we haven't been here long enough to have killed anyone you know, which can only mean that someone paid you to do this, and that could only be Manaka, since he seems like the type that loses his shit if he doesn't control everything. How am I doing so far? He asked his captive. Inichi made desperate noises of agreement, hoping that he would be let go if he ratted out the guy that had paid him to attack the trio. Mind you, he didn't actually know if the money had come from Manaka, but at this point he would have admitted to being the tooth fairy if someone asked him. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He'd been assured that the Seikirei with them was weak and that they were just a couple of strangely tall cosplayers. Well, you've heard your jaw cracking, but have you ever wondered what it was like to fly? Naruto asked with a sinister grin. Inichi went wide-eyed with sudden fear of what this horned monster was intending to do. The way that he was eyeballing the MBI clock tower was not very comforting. I've broken the bond, Naruto, feel free to dispose of the trash. Zana said from her spot near Akitsu. With much gusto, Naruto hurled his captive towards the tallest window of the MBI tower, figuring that it was probably Manaka's office window. The city echoed with a scream of terror as Junichi Tanagawa flew through the air at far beyond terminal velocity. It didn't take more than a second before he crashed into the wall just under the window and exploded in an orgy of blood, shattered bone and pulverized organs, liberally painting the building crimson. The MBI clock tower now sported a large omnidirectional bloodstain, while the shattered remains of Junichi Tanagawa slid out of the new indentation in the wall in a macabre mess that was only barely recognizable as a human corpse. You missed. Zana stated flatly. I haven't had too much occasion to practice my human throwing technique. Naruto responded dryly. I didn't count on his flailing throwing off my aim. Ah, fatality. Akitsu added. Both Naruto and Zana slowly turned to look at Akitsu, making her shuffle nervously before they started snickering and then full out laughing. Damn, that was a good one. Naruto said with a last chuckle. Real nice, Akitsu. Akitsu flushed with she hadn't been sure if her joke would be funny or not. Now we just have to teach you how to freeze someone solid and rip out their skull and spine with your bare hands. Zana commented. Naruto sweat-dropped at his wife, fairly certain that there was no pressing need to teach Akitsu how to perform gruesome and bloody executions. Let's not get carried away. Manaka just so happened to be in his office while this was going on and was observing the whole thing with MBI's satellite. Due to this, he had just enough time to realize that Naruto was looking towards his building when his office shuddered under the impact of a human body thrown with enormous strength and his window was streaked with blood from the corpse of the Ashikabi that had impacted just beneath it. He wiped a bit of sweat off his forehead when he realized that if that body had landed any higher, it would have likely killed him as well. Naruto couldn't have said I know what you did any clearer if he had written a sign. He had bribed the abusive Ashikabi of number 84 Yashima to attack them because he wanted to create a situation that would let him learn more about the Horn Duo and hopefully give him some kind of hint about how to control them, or at least how dangerous they were. Yashima was a fairly weak Seikirei, meaning that her Ashikabi was a non-entity in the Seikirei plan, which had made them expendable. Well, it had certainly told him that they were hideously dangerous. There was no Seikirei that was even close to being that strong. More importantly, it told him that they would be entirely uncontrollable if they were willing to kill someone in broad daylight or evening as the case may be, and in the middle of the street. Worse still, there had been no termination notification for Yashima, which could only mean that the horned woman whose name he still didn't know was capable of safely unwinging Seikirei. To sum up, he had on his hands a pair of enormously powerful beings that he knew nothing about and couldn't possibly hope to control. Frankly, he wasn't sure if it could get any worse. I believe I told you that I would rip off your fingers if you made any more threats and an assassination attempt counts. I wouldn't want to be called a liar after all. A horribly familiar female voice stated casually, making Manaka jump out of his chair in fright. How did you get in here? He demanded harshly, his usual eccentric antics nowhere to be seen because of his surprise. He would also very much like to know how she was somehow able to be in two places at once, since according to his satellite she was still on the street. Wrong question, you should be asking what I'm going to do now that I am here. Xana said and began approaching the MBI president. Manaka tried to lunge for the button that would call disciplinary squad, only to find himself thrown away from it by some invisible force. His mind raced feverishly for a way out of this situation when one hand was wrenched behind his back painfully and the sharp points of clawed digits were placed around his thumb. Wait, there is no need for this. I'm sure we could come to an agreement. He tried to bargain desperately. We're already in agreement. I am going to do as I said I would and rip your fingers off and you are going to scream loudly while I do it. Xana responded uncooperatively and proceeded to rip off the thumb. Manaka did indeed scream loudly, but he still tried to bargain in a desperate attempt to save the rest of his fingers. Wait please, I have a lot that I could give you if you would just stop. Such as these jinky things that I see in your mind. Xana revealed, causing the knot of terror in Manaka's gut to grow larger. Yes, I do believe I'll be taking them, along with the bodies of all the Seikirei that have been deactivated so far. Manaka didn't even have time to consider just how badly his plans were ruined when she continued speaking. But first, 7 more fingers to go. I'll be leaving your pinkies alone in case you were wondering. Granted, it's mostly because I find the idea of you with just your pinky fingers amusing, but you need to appreciate the small things in life. Manaka screamed again as his index finger was torn off. Manaka had not been the only one watching through that satellite. In a room that could only be described as the wet dream of a computer nerd secret, dark, lighted only by the glow of many monitors and pungent with the smell of food, sweat and perversion, a glasses-wearing Redeed was staring with incredulity at what had just happened. Once she'd gotten over her shock at seeing the horn duo that had number 07 following them around, brutally kill an Ashikabi and take his Seikirei, she immediately started hunting down any information she could find on them. And she found absolutely nothing. The only piece of information that existed on them was a name used to sign into the hotel, the most expensive one in the city at that, and that wasn't guaranteed to be accurate by a long shot. Matsu, Seikirei number 02, made a noise of frustration as every single attempt at finding any information on them turned up nothing. Any internet search on horned people predictably turned up only results of demons and various other mythological stuff that was no help at all in clarifying the situation. Some time later, Mia was also staring at the screen with surprise and confusion. You don't know anything about this either, huh Mia-tan? Matsu asked with her usual childish use of honorifics. The Samamiya, landlady of Izumo Inn and Seikirei number 01, known to very few as the Seikirei Pillar, pursed her and stared thoughtfully at the images on the screen. No Matsu, I do not. That level of physical strength alone is far beyond what I've ever seen a Seikirei possess, and they clearly don't consider Manaka a threat if they're willing to openly provoke him like this. They are likely as foreign to this planet as we are though. She said consideringly. What do you think they want with the Seikirei? I cannot say, but on the surface of it, it does not appear to be malicious. I suppose we will know once I speak to them. You're going to go talk to them? Matsu asked in surprise. It's a bit far for a humble landlady like myself to go, but I expect that they will come to Izumo Inn eventually. Yuhu. Matsu's sweat dropped as she stared after the retreating form of the purple-haired woman and muttered to herself. Humble landlady my ass. A miasma of terror began to exude from Mia and formed into the infamous Hanyu mask as she stopped and turned around with a pleasant smile. What was that Matsu? I could swear that I just heard you cussing, but that can't be right because foul language is forbidden in Izumo Inn. Matsu-tan is sorry. Naruto gently laid Yushima into the bed and turned towards the silent Akitsu. Could you stay with her tonight? She's going to be scared and it would probably make her feel better too if you were there when she waked up. Akitsu nodded, but her mind was on something else entirely. You're wondering if it's possible to fix you so that you could be winged, aren't you? Naruto asked, feeling quite sure that he was correct. She nodded again, unable to prevent the hopeful look that flittered across her face. Come sit with me. He said and went to the couch. Doing as she was told, Akitsu sat down next to him and fixed him with an expectant look. She was a bit confused as to why he looked amused, but it fled her mind when he pulled her closer so that she was halfway lying on him. You'd like either me or Xana to wing you, wouldn't you? Yes, master. We can restore your ability to be winged, but we can't wing you. But why? Akitsu did her best to keep the disappointment from her voice, but wasn't entirely successful. Tell me what you know about the winging process. When an Ashikabi and Seikirei kiss, the Seikirei becomes bound to, and must obey the commands of their Ashikabi. Akitsu explained her very limited knowledge of the process as best she could. Don't you find that rather strange? What kind of race is forced into submission when they kiss someone? Naruto asked pointedly. Akitsu's forehead creased in slight confusion. She'd never really thought about it and it had never seemed strange to her. She knew that humans had nothing like that, but Seikirei weren't human. That is the way of the Seikirei. She responded uncertainly, no longer sure if that was true. No, it isn't. Manaka changed you all before he released you, changing the nature of the winging into what it is now. The winging was meant to happen when a Seikirei finds a person that they love and want to bond with, and it was meant to be initiated by both parties. Forcing the bond on a Seikirei should have been impossible, and a single Ashikabi having multiple Seikirei should also have been impossible. The winging as it is now is a perversion of something that should have been beautiful. Anna had found all of this and more in Manaka's skull and related all to him. A genius the man might be, but he was also completely insane. Limiting the Seikirei's power had been a wise move, and from a certain point of view, even the changes to the winging had been smart at the time, but he'd taken things much too far. Manaka was already quite high on Naruto's to-do list, but he'd been effectively neutered when Xana had taken away the Jinki and the bodies of the deactivated Seikirei. He'd kill the man later, it might be amusing to grind his plans into dust one piece at a time. But why can't you wing me? Akitsu asked hesitantly once she'd processed the shock. Xana and I are already bonded, there isn't any room for another. The bond between Seikirei and Ashikabi as it is now is a bond between master and slave, no matter how flowery anyone describes it, which is why multiple Seikirei can be bonded to a single Ashikabi. The bond between me and Xana is a bond between equals, and by its very nature, does not allow a third person to join. Naruto explained. I don't need to be equal. Akitsu offered hopefully. Nice try Akitsu, but that still wouldn't work even if one of us wanted to do it. He answered dryly. Once we learn how to do it safely, we're going to restore the Seikirei to how they were supposed to be, you included. When that happens, I'd like to see you find someone that you could love and bond with as an equal. You're welcome to stay with us if you like, but we can't give you what you want. Akitsu was disappointed that she wouldn't be winged, but she was determined to stay exactly where she was. In the end, nothing had changed and she was happy with things as they were, wings or no. She wasn't going to give up this happiness and security, even if she could get her wings with someone else. So, are you going to tell me why and how an Ashikabi ended up splattered across the building and you lost 8 fingers? Sahashi Takami, MBI head researcher, demanded unsympathetically of her boss and much to her regret, the father of her children. Manaka had been getting steadily more obsessed with his insane Seikirei plan over the years, and nothing she did seemed to limit the damage he was intent on doing. Instead of trying to protect the Seikirei, he had become hellbent on sacrificing them all in an attempt to bring about some nebulous new age of the gods. The only reason that Manaka was still alive was because she'd been on the way up to his office before he'd started losing fingers, otherwise he might well have bled to death before help could arrive. Truth be told, she thought it served him right for his schemes to blow up in his face for once and didn't feel at all sorry for him, nor was she upset about the death of number 84's Ashikabi, as the man had been scum of the highest order. She was far more interested in the fact that Yushima hadn't been deactivated by his death. The pair of unknowns that do not play by the rules have suddenly appeared to Kami-chan. Manaka proclaimed, suppressing the urge to gesticulate with his hands. No reason to cause himself any more pain than necessary, he would just have to wait for the doctors to fit him with cybernetic fingers. It was an experimental technology and it would never be as good as the real thing, but it was better than nothing. Don't call me Takami-chan you ass. She snapped and kicked at his hospital bed to shake it and make him yelp in pain as his injuries were jostled. Now explain what happened. Manaka did so, knowing that she would find out about it soon enough anyway, or most of it at least. He'd kept it from her so far, wanting to find out more about the 2 anomalies before he informed her, so that he could better predict and control her actions, but there was no point hiding it now. Takami massaged the bridge of her nose, feeling a migraine coming on, due to her sheer irritation at his stupidity. He had somehow managed to earn himself the anger of what were obviously 2 massively powerful, remorseless killers. Even worse, they had no idea just how powerful they were or what their motives were aside from having an interest in the Seikirei. The only thing that they did actually know was that they would react with extreme levels of violence to any action taken against them. Additionally, they had now lost all of the Jinki, as well as the bodies of the Seikirei that had already been deactivated. This was potentially worse than if Miya had decided that she didn't feel like playing nice anymore. Still, there were some bright points to the situation. Clearly, they weren't intent on exterminating the Seikirei or causing random bloodbaths, if their treatment of the unfortunate Akitsu and Yushima were any clue. Their apparent ability to unwing a Seikirei was also quite shocking, but not unwelcome news to her. There were far too many Seikirei winged unwillingly by Ashikabi who only saw them as tools to be used. In any case, the only point on which she agreed with Manaka was that they couldn't just be left alone, but she also didn't dare provoke them too much. The rest of the world was all too eager for a crack to open through which they could slip in and kidnap a few Seikirei to be used either for experimentation or breeding. Exactly the kind of crack that would appear if those two decided that MBI would look better if it was in pieces. The question was, what could she do? At this point, still unknown to just about everyone, the event had also attracted the attention of Kerasuba. The black Seikirei didn't know who had done it or why they had done it, but she admired the beautiful brutality of it. The raw strength needed to throw a human hard enough that their body literally exploded under the force alone was enough to catch her interest. Whoever had done this had just made themselves interesting to her, and she would find them and fight them. It promised to be a glorious battle, and she was bored of being MBI's watchdog. Ishima woke up feeling strange. Usually, waking up was followed by the mixed emotions of love and fear for her ashikabi, but there was none of that this time. This time, that was absent along with the ever-present bond. Without the bond keeping her negative emotions bottled up, they roared to the surface and took her completely by surprise, so that she didn't even notice Akitsu laying next to her. Akitsu herself was woken up when Ishima suddenly surged into a sitting position and looked around frantically for her hammer, wanting the reassurance of her weapon. "Ah, good morning," Akitsu said quietly. You're that Seikirei I attacked. Where am I? What happened to my ashikabi?" Ishima babbled, confused as to why the thought of her ashikabi brought up only feelings of anger and fear. "Naruto-sama killed your ashikabi. You are in Naruto-sama and Ana-sama's hotel room." Akitsu answered with a slight cocking of her head. She could see now why Naruto had asked her to stay with the freed Seikirei. The girl was a mess. "He's dead?" Ishima was surprised by the relief in her own voice. Shouldn't she be feeling upset at the loss of her ashikabi? Wait, if he's dead then how am I still alive? Ana-sama unwinged you before Naruto-sama killed him. But it's impossible to unwing a Seikirei after they become winged. Ishima insisted. That was what they had always been told. Winging was supposed to be permanent. Naruto-sama and Ana-sama are gods, they can do anything. Akitsu explained patiently. Gods? Ishima repeated dubiously, privately thinking that this Seikirei had an ashikabi with a massively oversized ego. Her own former ashikabi had an undeservedly high opinion of himself too, just not this high. "Who are you anyway? We never introduced each other." "I'm Ishima, number 84. "Ah, Akitsu, Seikirei number 07. "A single digit," Ishima said in surprise. She'd been told that the Seikirei that she was to attack was weak, but a single digit was easily a lot more powerful than her. "So which one is your ashikabi?" "Neither, I am a scrap number, unwingable." Akitsu didn't really want to explain everything that Naruto had told her earlier, so she stuck with the old explanation. At the moment it was still true anyway. Ishima sat down on the bed next to Akitsu and hugged her legs, memories of how terrible it had been to be winged by her abusive ashikabi, bubbling to the forefront of her mind. It hadn't seemed all that bad while she'd been winged, but now that she was free and not looking at Tanagawa through rose-tinted glasses, it was horrible. "I wish I'd been unwingable when I met that bastard." She muttered to herself bitterly, feeling dirty from the memories of the things he told her to do and which she had been more than willing to go along with. "Ah. You are now. Ana-sama made you unwingable," Akitsu said, managing to put some sympathy in her voice. "Nothing like seeing someone else in a worse situation to appreciate the benefits of your own circumstances." "But how?" Ishima asked in shock. Akitsu merely cocked her head slightly and stared at her fellow Seikirei. "Right, gods," Ishima said with a mutter, still not entirely sure she believed that. "You should speak to them," Akitsu said. She was not the person to speak to if you wanted explanations. When Naruto had fully explained the situation to her, Ishima was very angry. Not at him, but at Manaka and MBI. Because of their meddling she'd ended up winged by that abusive asshole and had only gotten out of it because she'd gotten lucky. She was looking forward to the day when her winging ability was fixed to the way it was supposed to be, but she was determined to make absolutely certain that any ashikabi she picked in the future was one that was worth bonding to. It was a huge relief to hear that it would be her that would be initiating the winging next time, instead of it being forced on her. The only reason Tanagawa had even been able to forcibly wing her had been because MBI had drummed it into her head that she wasn't supposed to kill humans, so she hadn't fought against him when he'd kissed her. It was just bad luck that he happened to be an ashikabi, since not all humans were capable of winging a Seikirei. Still, one question nagged at her mind. Why are you doing this? The Seikirei plan has nothing to do with you, and you say that you can't wing any Seikirei, but you're still collecting them. Because it makes me happy to adopt a few little sisters and take care of them, Naruto explained with a grin. Ishima continued to look skeptical. She hadn't been this distrustful when MBI had first released her, but her bad experience with Tanagawa had instilled a lot of cynicism in her. "Master is a pervert," Akitsu asserted with a nod. Ana snorted in amused agreement. Akitsu was rapidly becoming the queen of one-liners, most of them aimed at Naruto. Xana was pleased. "You're getting awfully cheeky, Akitsu," Naruto commented with a sweat drop. The Seikirei merely cocked her head and gave him an innocent look, which was remarkably effective when combined with her sleepy expression. It made him want to hug her. "You say you're just doing this because you want to take care of the Seikirei, but you make her call you master?" Yashima asked disapprovingly. "Make her?" Naruto asked back with an eyebrow raised in incredulity. "I can't make her stop." Yashima looked at her fellow Seikirei, who continued to look innocent, and began to get the feeling that Naruto was not the only pervert in the room. Shaking it off, she turned to the horn duo and asked another question. "Is that really all there is to it? You just got involved in the Seikirei plan because it makes you happy to take care of a few girls?" "We got involved because we wanted to. There is only so much time you can spend on a deserted island doing nothing but sleeping, fighting and ing before you get bored." "Ing is not a word, master," Akitsu interjected, flushing at her own boldness. "Did you just interrupt me to make a wise crack?" he asked incredulously. "Ah, yes," Akitsu said back uncertainly, old doubts coming back and making her think that she had gone too far. "I'm so proud," Naruto said, wiping away a fake tear. "So am I, keep it up, Akitsu," Xana added. The miniature smile came to Akitsu's face for a few moments before it smoothed back into her standard sleepy expression, but she was still smiling on the inside. Akitsu decided that she liked it when they were proud of her, it gave her the odd urge to stick her chest out proudly and made her feel warm inside. "Anyway, as I was saying. There is no more Seikirei plan, we've already wrecked it, and Manaka is only alive because we think it might be funny to see what he'll do now that Xana ripped off 8 of his fingers and took away most of the stuff that made the Seikirei plan work." "You ripped off his fingers?" Yashima asked incredulously, staring at the horned woman. "Oh yes, my only regret is that I did not think to record the event." His screaming was most amusing. Xana confirmed with a smirk. "So now what?" the hammer-wielding Seikirei asked uncertainly after a moment of silence. The horned woman was scary. "Why are you asking me?" Naruto asked back, amused. "You can do whatever you want." Surprised by the response, Yashima realized that she had no idea what to do with herself. The Seikirei plan had given her direction, but without it she had nothing. The only thing she was any good at was swinging her hammer around and following the orders of her Ashikabi, which she didn't have anymore. Without the Seikirei plan which told her to fight her fellow Seikirei and without an Ashikabi, she felt lost. "You can stay here with us for as long as you need a place to stay. You'll be protected and provided for," Naruto offered, knowing that the girl had nothing but her hammer. It was a nice hammer, but it wouldn't help her get food or a place to sleep. Not without turning to crime anyway, and Yashima didn't seem like the criminal type. "I thank you," she said quietly. "What would you want in return for this?" "Hugs and Ani-chan." Takami fought down the nervous urge to start smoking as the elevator made its way up to the penthouse where the horned duo lived. After much deliberation, she had come to the conclusion that the wisest course of action would be to approach them openly and simply talk to them. There was far too much that could go wrong if she tried any subterfuge, and they decided to react with the same lack of restraint as before. The creepy way that the door swung open all by itself as she approached it did nothing to settle her nerves. Steeling herself, she entered the room with an air of confidence despite the fact that she felt rather shaken by the fact that she was obviously expected despite having made no appointment. "Ah, Takami-san," Akitsu greeted. This was one of the only MBI researchers that had always been nice. "Akitsu?" Takami returned. "Doing well, I hope." "Ah. Yes. Master and mistress have been treating me well." "I'm glad to hear it." Takami was not at all surprised by the submissive way that Akitsu spoke of the two. The Seikirei had always been very deferential. She forced herself not to react to the sight of the 7 Jinki that had not very long ago been in MBI's most secure vault, lying carelessly on the table, as if they were no more than pretty trinkets. "Akitsu? Is someone there?" Yashima called and entered the room. "Oh, Takami-san." Yashima. The researcher in her desperately wanted to take Yashima back to the lab and investigate her miraculous unwinging, but she kept that firmly in check. She didn't want to end up as a second bloodstain on the MBI clock tower, in case this Uzumaki Naruto took offense to that, even if she had only good intentions. The floor shook slightly as someone heavy landed on their feet right behind her, making Takami freeze in surprised fright. Slowly, she turned around and found herself facing a muscular bare chest. Craning her head upwards, she saw that the chest belonged to the very man that she had come to speak with, a man that was currently aiming a grin full of sharp teeth at her, clearly amused by the fact that he'd made her jump. "Uzumaki-san," she greeted. Tsuhashi Takami, MBI head researcher and the woman in charge of the Seikirei plan supposedly, though in reality not in charge of it at all. Naruto greeted back, still grinning. "And how would you know that?" Takami said back, giving no hint of just how unnerved she was. That unnaturally intense lit-eyed gaze was making her feel like a mouse, and his intimidating size wasn't helping to lessen that feeling. My wife violated Manaka's mind while she was tearing off his fingers. We know everything that he knows, including the fact that he still sporadically wets his bed. The last time was 4 months ago, in case you were wondering. I see. Now Takami was even more unnerved. Manaka hadn't mentioned any mind reading, though in hindsight, she should have known it would be something like that. How else would they have known of the jinky? May I ask where your wife is? Napping, she does that sometimes. Okay. Why are you here, Takami-chan? Naruto asked, deliberately using the cutesy honorific. Takami scowled, somehow knowing that he'd called her that with the express purpose of irritating her. I had some questions I wanted to ask you. By all means. He said magnanimously. First, I'd like to know what you are. Naruto grinned at the predictable question. Horny. And apparently fond of bad puns. Takami shot back. Very fond of them. He agreed. Master is a pervert. Akitsu offered helpfully. Thank you, Akitsu, it sure is nice to have you around so that people know I'm a pervert right away. Naruto said dryly. You say that as if it isn't obvious, Ani-chan. Yashima added. You walk around bare-chested all the time and take every opportunity to make a statement. Alright, but what species are you? Takami persisted, trying to get the conversation back on track, making a note of the way Yashima addressed the man. It did a lot to calm her down to see that he was treating the unwinged Seikirei as a little sister rather than as a new accusation. Human ascended to divinity. Naruto answered, eagerly taking in the incredulous and disbelieving expression. It never got old. You think you're God? Takami asked, her tone full of incredulity. And she thought that Manaka was insane. Instead of answering, Naruto pointed a hand out the window. Takami looked in that direction and felt her mouth going dry when the previously cloudless day became a violent thunderstorm, complete with huge lightning bolts and deafening peals of thunder, and then it suddenly dispersed as if nothing had happened. I could also make some portentous statements about the world suffering 2 million years of darkness under a black sun and a red moon if you'd like. He offered. No, that's okay. Takami said faintly, still staring outside, which was once again a perfect sunny day. Any more questions? Shaking off her shock, she focused back on the matter at hand. What is your interest in the Seikirei? Most of them are just so cute and I like having little sisters to play with. She said skeptically. What about Akitsu then? What kind of man sees dozens of highly beautiful, busty women and thinks little sisters? Akitsu is a pervert. Naruto explained. Master is so mean. The Seikirei said in her defense. He likes to put me in chains and spank me. Notice how she never said that she isn't a pervert. Naruto pointed out dryly. Or that she likes the chains even more than me. Last question. Takami drawled, wanting to get away from what was obviously a room full of perverts as soon as possible. Could you please not destroy MBI? We won't be able to protect the Seikirei from the rest of the world without it. Why the sudden concern for the Seikirei, Takami-chan? Weren't you one of those that advocated the changes to the winging? Naruto asked with amusement, cocking his head at the scientist. Guilty conscience. Taking a deep breath to center herself again, more because she was shaken at the reminder that he knew everything than at the annoying honorific. It had been easy to forget that when he wasn't mentioning it. I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. It wasn't, and I want to protect the Seikirei from any further harm. Don't worry yourself too much, Takami-chan, I'll keep the Seikirei safe from being kidnapped, and eventually I'll unwing those that are bound to unworthy Ashikabi. Of course, I'll probably also kill quite a few of them, since I already know that not all of the Seikirei are good people. Right, well that's all I guess. All in all, Takami was pleased with the way things had gone. Naruto had been reasonable and friendly, and he didn't have any particularly nefarious purposes in mind. None that he was willing to share at least, though she sorely doubted her ability to do anything about it if he did have any nefarious purposes. The only point of worry was the fact that he never said that he wouldn't destroy MBI, but that was honestly a minor issue compared to everything else, even if she did end up losing her job. Feel free to drop by again, Takami-chan, it's been a while since I've slept with a MILF. Naruto said when she was almost out the door. Takami froze again before moving forward stiffly, her eyebrow twitching in restrained anger. She wasn't sure if that was a veiled hint that he knew about her children and was making a threat or if it was honestly just a proposition. Either way, it was pissing her off. Once the woman was gone, Naruto turned to the two Seikirei and announced. Well, now that that's over with, let's go. Are you sure this is a good idea, Ani-chan? Yashima asked worriedly from her place on Naruto's shoulders. Of course it isn't a good idea, Yashima. If it was a good idea, then it wouldn't be any fun. I'll keep you safe though, don't worry. Naruto answered and turned towards Akitsu, who was standing next to him on the roof of the hotel. Ready, Akitsu? Ah yes. The Ai Seikirei confirmed. She was wearing casual pants and a t-shirt instead of her usual kimono today. The kimono would get in the way too much. With a countdown, they threw themselves over the edge, creating a slippery path of ice under their feet as they went, sliding across the Shinto-Tito skyline. Ishima released a terrified scream right into Naruto's ears for a few seconds, until she got used to it and started enjoying herself. Unfortunately, they had no more than 15 seconds of time to enjoy it before Akitsu's ice path gave off an ominous creaking sound and broke under its own weight. Naruto swiftly grabbed the Ai Seikirei into a bridle-style hold and melted the falling ice into water so that it didn't kill anyone under it. They'd get a nasty cold street shower though. Damn you physics, always ruining the fun. He swore. He'd forgotten that Akitsu couldn't make her ice unbreakable the way that he could. I like this better. Akitsu admitted as they glided across the city. You would. Yashima commented from Naruto's back. They continued this for several minutes longer, receiving many shocked exclamations from the people under them until a large chunk of the city had an ice path over it. All three of them took note of the three Seikirei jumping across the rooftops in an effort to catch them, and Naruto eventually slid to a stop on the rooftop of a building that was fairly close to their hotel, willing the ice to melt and drenching a lot of people in ice-cold water. Ah, the indignant anger radiating from the people below at this instant, it was glorious. When the three Seikirei that had been chasing them caught up, both Akitsu and Yashima stiffened in recognition. Ah, you must be the infamous disciplinary squad. Naruto said as a greeting, assessing the threat level of the three females. The pink-haired one was giving him a strangely Sakura vibe for some reason, but she wasn't even close to being as dangerous as his old teammate. The bandaged one with the claws was at a similar level. The long-haired one with the sword was a lot more dangerous than them. We are. Kerasuba confirmed. You wouldn't happen to be the guy that gave the MBI tower its wonderful new coat of paint, would you? I am indeed. Are you here to make something of it, little crow? Naruto asked with a grin. Kerasuba gave a menacing little chuckle that concealed just how irritated she was by the nickname. You've got some balls to call me, the Black Seikirei, little crow. I'm going to enjoy cutting them off. Girls, go back home without me. Looks like Kerasuba wants to play too, and it would be rude to deny her when she obviously put in so much effort to track me down, and don't worry, I'll be fine. Naruto said to Akitsu and Yashima. They looked worried for a moment before recalling what he was and started roof-hopping away after a simple nod. But girls. Not very nice of you to lie to them. Kerasuba commented after they were out of earshot. She had no interest in those two. Naruto snickered, much to Kerasuba's irritation, and on one hand, the fact that he was laughing at her pissed her off, and on the other, it would make the fight even better. Come on then if you're so certain of yourself, little crow. He taunted and summoned the kusanagi to his hand, having left it at the hotel to give Yashima room to ride on his back. Kerasuba carefully assessed her opponent as he stood confidently in front of her with that infuriating grin on his face. He held his blade competently despite the seeming carelessness of it, and his physique suggested strength, all about size, reach and power. In spite of that, he moved with a sense of control and fluidity that contradicted his brutish appearance. He'd already demonstrated the power to summon his sword and ice. If he had two, then he could have more, unlike her who was limited to just her blade work. He was almost definitely more powerful than her. But, she had been dying of boredom surrounded by all these weaklings. With Yumgon and Mia pretending that she wasn't a killer, there was nobody to challenge her. She could already feel it, the blood pounding in her veins at the prospect of a battle against a powerful foe. Benitsubasa and Heihain had already been warned not to interfere no matter what happened, even if she was losing, even if she died. It had been so many years since she'd last had a battle worth a name, and nobody was going to take it away from her. Neither one of them had so much as moved yet, but she knew that the man before her was a beast. The predatory gleam as his eyes roved over her body let her know that he'd picked up on 100 subtle tells about her, just as she had done to him. What excited her most of all was the fact that not the slightest shred of uncertainty or fear entered his eyes or body language. He was utterly certain that he was better than her. Whether he was or not, finding out would be glorious. On the other side, Naruto had noted that she had grasped her blade in a two-handed grip that it was meant to be used in instead of her usual lackadaisical one-handed grip. She was taking this seriously. But this promised to be interesting, even if he would have to hold back a ridiculous degree. Before they started though, there was something that he felt compelled to do. Is it just me or are you guys hearing the Mortal Kombat theme song too? Heihain asked in confusion, looking around for the source of the music. I can hear it just fine, I just didn't know what it was. Benitsubasa said. Boy, Heihain. Naruto called out, gaining the bandage claw user's attention. You play Mortal Kombat? Sure do. The blue Seikirei confirmed cheerfully. You should come over sometime so we can play. Don't go making friends with the people who are going to kill you, asshole. Benitsubasa exploded. Naruto blinked at her, surprised by the random burst of temper. Ignoring the pink-haired one, he turned to Kerasuba. Is she always like this? Pretty much. Kerasuba answered, still keeping a wary eye on him. She had a feeling that he was trying to provoke her into attacking by starting a conversation with Heihain. It's almost like having Sakura back. Naruto sighed nostalgically. She was angry a lot too, and she had pink hair and can't forget about the fact that she was flat as a board. Not as flat as Benitsubasa, but she didn't need to know that. You bastard, I'll kill you. Benitsubasa howled in fury while Heihain was nearly convulsing in laughter. Too angry to remember Kerasuba's previous instruction not to fight, she charged at Naruto with every intention of punching his lights out. The fact that the Mortal Kombat theme song was still playing without any apparent source didn't help her irritation. Used to being the stronger fighter in any battle, she went for a straight-on attack, which Naruto had no problem catching head-on, and then using his greater size to manhandle her into a one-handed submission hold, with chains springing from his back to tie her down instantly. Aw, don't be like that, I bet you are really sensitive, how about you let me them and find out? He said teasingly, knowing that she would be easily provoked. Those are for Natsuo-sama, you sick pervert. She hollered and tried to wiggle out of the chains to no avail. From what I know of this Natsuo character, he's more likely to be interested in my than yours. Naruto mused and sat her down on his foot, preparing to launch her way. Oh well, bye-bye. Kerasuba and Heihain watched their temperamental teammate fly away with a scream for a moment before focusing back on Naruto, though Kerasuba muttered idiot under her breath. So, about that Mortal Kombat game. Naruto prodded, once more looking at Heihain. At this point Kerasuba had just about enough of being patient and rushed at him, though much more carefully than Benitsubasa had done. Aren't you forgetting something? She growled at him over their locked swords. Urara, what would that be? He asked back, blinking innocently. Setting up a game of Mortal Kombat with another player is a big deal for me, you know. Akitsu won't play anything besides Sub-Zero, and she's getting disturbingly good at it. I don't think video games are going to be your biggest problem after I cut your balls off. Kerasuba retorted viciously and swung her blade again. It's decided then. Naruto said firmly. You're going to become my friend. What the hell kind of logic is that? The black Seikirei demanded over the clashing of steel and Heihain's chortling. For the blue Seikirei, this was hilarious. And the Mortal Kombat theme song was still playing in the background for this entire time. So far, every single woman that has threatened to emasculate me has ended up becoming my friend, and this was before I became capable of growing them back. If you didn't want to be my friend, then don't threaten to cut, tear off or otherwise remove my balls. Naruto reasoned. Granted, that list was mainly restricted to Tsunade and Sakura, but the point still stood. Are you even listening to yourself? Kerasuba demanded again, swinging at his legs at the same time. Naruto jumped over the low blade and kicked out at her while in midair, forcing Kerasuba to dodge to the side as she was unable to bring her blade around fast enough. You know what? Never mind, just die. Naruto kept grinning as the sword-wielding Seikirei continued attacking him furiously, even chasing him to other rooftops in an attempt to cut him open. She was good, fast and lethal, but had obviously not been challenged seriously in a while. A lot like him in that regard actually. There is blood in your footsteps, little crow. Has it really been that long? He purred at her as he continued evading and parrying her strikes. Yes. Give me more. Kerasuba demanded, her blood boiling with excitement at this battle. He was so good. Maybe as good as me or even better. She wanted to see how good he really was. As you wish. He agreed, using his much superior strength to shove her sword away and went into a spinning backhand that smacked across her face. He made sure to keep his fingers extended instead of making a fist so that it only stung and broke the skin on the inside of her cheek without truly injuring her. It only seemed to excite Kerasuba even more as she came back twice as viciously. Much to Naruto's amusement and intrigue, he could smell that she was getting seriously aroused. They continued fighting in a stalemate for a couple of minutes longer until she pulled an unexpected maneuver and scored a shallow cut on his leg. He might be keeping his speed and strength way down, but it was still an impressive bit of sword work. Is that the best you have? Come on. Give me more. She demanded again, driving at him in an almost berserker fashion. Finding her passion for the battle to be rather infectious, Naruto complied and attacked from below, cutting through the roof of the building as he swung the kusanagi at her. Surprised by the unexpected move, she was forced into a block that was rapidly overpowered and had her blade pushed up. Off balance and not daring to let go of her sword, she was unable to defend herself from the knee strike to the gut that explosively forced the air out of her lungs. Yes, that's it. Show me what you can do. Naruto couldn't help but be amused at how battle crazy she was. He'd never met anyone quite so obsessed with a good fight before. Still, they had barely even gotten warmed up and the rooftops were already suffering damage. Kerasuba obviously wasn't one to care about collateral damage or bystanders getting killed in the crossfire, but he was. If he was going to kill someone, then it was damn well going to be on purpose. Well, I can't go too crazy here without accidentally killing a whole lot of people, so you're going to have to chase me if you want to play some more. Kerasuba's bloodthirsty smile widened. She didn't give a damn about the humans, but if he wanted to move the fight outside of the city before they got serious, then that was fine with her. With this in mind, she started jumping after him the instant that he leaped off the roof. She did stop in surprise, however, when he swung his sword at the air and a portal opened. Staring at the swirling, multicolored vortex that led to an unknown destination, Kerasuba didn't need more than a moment to make her choice and jump through it. She was not giving up such a great fight just because she had no idea where that portal led. Benitsuba, who had returned some time ago in a boiling rage, stared stupidly as the portal closed behind Kerasuba. How the hell are we going to explain this? Kerasuba landed lightly on a courtyard paved with large stones and looked around warily. She hadn't been sure what to expect after jumping through that portal, but this had certainly not been it. She appeared to be in the courtyard of a huge stone castle that had many towers and battlements rising into the steel-gray sky. Jumping on the nearest wall, her breath caught in her throat in shock. She was definitely not in Shinto-Tito anymore. In fact, she would be mightily surprised if she was even in Japan. There were nothing but jagged, rocky mountains in all directions as far as she could see, and she knew that there were no mountain ranges this massive in Japan. It was also bitterly cold, the freezing winds cutting to the bone. Why the hell would anyone build a fortress like this in the middle of nowhere? How do you like the view? The voice of the man she chased here echoed from above. Kerasuba snapped her head up and saw him squatting on top of a tower, still ridiculously barefoot and bare-chested, as if he was on a tropical beach, instead of this frigid fortress in the ass end of nowhere. Where are we? She shouted up at him to be heard over the wind. I don't feel like telling you that, I'm afraid you'll have to beat it out of me if you can. Naruto teased. Kerasuba couldn't keep down her bloodthirsty grin even if she had tried. That was a course of action that she could certainly agree with. If that's how you want to play this game. Swinging her sword, she sent a blast of energy and pressurized air at him with intent to maim, but Naruto jumped over it and brought his own sword down on her from overhead. Kerasuba dodged a vicious blow by jumping down into the courtyard, seeing the wisdom of her own move when a perfectly straight cut appeared down the length of the wall. Naruto pursued her, and they engaged in a high-speed series of attacks, parries and counterattacks, while a section of the severed tower crashed into the wall and collapsed it. Kerasuba was enjoying herself more than she had enjoyed anything in too many years to count. She lived for this, the crash of steel on steel, the thundering of her heart, and the shockwaves of her opponent's blows echoing in her bones. Where before, the wind had seemed so cold that it would turn her blood to ice if she stood still for too long, now it felt good against her burning hot body. She never even noticed that her panties had become soaked or the thin trickle of arousal going down her legs, being far too intent on the fight to pay it any mind. Naruto was also enjoying himself, though not to the same degree. Unlike Kerasuba, who needed to put everything she had into the fight, he had to hold back. Not so much his skill, but his speed and strength. He was not even close to being pressed hard, but he hadn't expected to be. Still, the fight was enjoyable in spite of that, and the smell of his opponent's arousal was rather amusing. He hadn't thought that Kerasuba would get so turned on from a fight. As their battle steadily tore apart the courtyard, Kerasuba started having a hard time. There was a lot of rubble scattered around now from various missed attacks, and it was limiting her maneuverability. This was a problem, as the superior reach and strength of her opponent made it hazardous for her to stay in one spot for too long. She'd already taken a few cuts, as well as blows from his hands and feet, and it was getting harder and harder to keep him at bay, much less mount her own attacks. Additionally, much to her consternation, the few cuts that she dealt him had already healed, which meant that only a killing blow would truly put him down. Knowing that the battleground no longer favored her, she opted to change it in spite of the fact that she hated even that tiny retreat. Jumping up on what appeared to be a high stone walkway between two different parts of the castle, she instantly started sending more air blades back at him. Naruto countered them with air blades of his own and responded by throwing a few fireballs back at her. Kerasuba smirked to herself, having suspected that he would be capable of using more than just one element and cut through the fireballs, dissipating them harmlessly. That's not going to work, I can cut through any elemental attack. She taunted. Oh? Try this one then. Naruto responded with a smirk and raised his hand to the sky. Kerasuba snapped her head upwards, seeing the forming storm cloud that was lit from within with an occasional flash of lightning, and instantly deduced what was going to happen. She swore and threw herself to the side, through an open portcullis and into the interior of the castle. Just in time too, as a violent lightning strike crashed into her previous location and annihilated the stone walkway, as well as collapsed a gateway she jumped through. Wanting to get out of the darkness and back to the fight, she tried to cut through the wall, only to receive a nasty shock as her blade clanged ineffectually on the stone, doing nothing but creating a few sparks. Kerasuba stared incomprehendingly at her sword, with which she'd easily cut through steel before, but now couldn't cut simple stone. Even more perplexing was the fact that she'd been able to cut that exact stone not very long ago without difficulty. Behind her, a row of torches lit up all by themselves, illuminating a path through the pitch-black darkness. Pressing her together and lowering her sword down to her side, Kerasuba muttered to herself as she started walking, her breath misting in the cold air. "I'm getting the feeling that I may have underestimated him just a bit. What sorcery is this?" Xana demanded, glaring at the computer accusingly. She couldn't understand it. Not very long ago, it had irritated her when Naruto had done this, and now she was doing the exact same thing, constantly pressing the next song button until it reached a song that she liked. It made no sense. Why would she do that? She'd chosen all of these songs because she enjoyed them, there was no logical reason to be skipping any of them, and yet she was doing so. She had absolutely no desire to remove them, but she didn't want to listen to them when they came on either, so she just kept skipping them until random chance chose one that she did like hearing, and then she felt the absurd urge to just keep repeating that song for a while, coincidentally something that had also annoyed her when Naruto had done it. Frankly, she was starting to think that there was some kind of undetectable compulsion on these music players. "Xana-sama," Yashima said nervously. "What? Shouldn't we go help Oni-chan?" I mean, he was about to fight the disciplinary squad. Despite Akitsu telling her that Naruto was in no danger, she couldn't shake off the worry. The disciplinary squad had been every Sekirei's personal bujiman for so long that she had subconsciously started thinking of them as invincible. "So?" Xana asked without interest. "Well, he could get hurt." "Oh, he's definitely going to get hurt, but only because he's an idiot that enjoys a little pain from time to time. Whatever Kerasuba does to him, I probably do worse when we have. Don't worry about him, he'll be back soon enough. I guess." Kerasuba stalked forward, starting to get pretty damn frustrated with this castle. Soon after she'd left the collapsed entrance, she had started being periodically attacked by all sorts of strange fantasy shit. Such as animated suits of armor, walking skeletons, shambling zombies and a gamut of other weirdness. Aside from the various beasties, there was also the occasional trap such as arrows and spears from the wall, collapsing floors, moving circular saws and other such things. The entire freaking time, creepy, ominous music of undeterminate origin had been playing, and even worse, it was playing in such a way that it constantly threw off her danger sense. It randomly peaked, making her think that she was going to get attacked only for nothing to happen, and it stayed calm only for a zombie to suddenly grab at her ankle. At least it had taught her to beware any areas where there was any earth, it was almost a certainty that undead were going to crawl out of it. Actually, the whole thing had left her feeling massively paranoid. Individually, none of the things that attacked her were at all dangerous, but all of them seemed inordinately good at surprise attacks. Not every suit of armor started trying to attack her, but those that did it with extreme suddenness and without warning. Any shadowy corner or tapestry could be hiding an enemy, and it left her feeling wary of everything. And no matter how tough she was, even she was not immune to the psychological effect of being constantly ambushed by the walking dead, while that damnable music kept grinding away at her nerves. The torchlight was only intermittent and created deep pits of fearing shadow everywhere, further fraying her nerves. At least it seemed to be over, as she could see natural light spilling into the darkness from the top of a large staircase. Making her way to the top of it, she could do nothing but stare at the thing occupying the absurdly massive chamber. It was a dragon, a real-life dragon with glinting blue scales and a wickedly barbed tail. 2 pairs of horns curved backwards along its enormous head. It wasn't like a Japanese or Chinese dragon that would have a serpentine body with small limbs, but a more Western style, one with a massive body and powerfully muscled limbs that ended with claws longer than her sword and thicker than her body. It also had wings that were currently kept close to its body. Judging by the size of them, the chamber was too small for it to be able to spread them comfortably. Which made her wonder how the hell the huge thing had even gotten into this chamber, since she could see no opening even close to big enough for it to have come through. Unless the roof opened or something. As she said to herself. The shit that she'd had to deal with down in the darkness had been pretty weird, but a dragon? Seriously? Apparently hearing her, the massive creature turned its head towards her and trained its golden reptilian eyes on her and puffed out a short burst of steam, coincidentally exposing ridiculously large teeth. Gripping her sword tightly, she sent an air blade at it only to watch in dismay as it broke apart on its scales without effect. She had no time to consider any alternative avenues of attack, as the dragon apparently took exception to being attacked and responded with an inhale of air and an fiery exhale that she only barely dodged because of its sheer size. Even so, her disciplinary squad Haori ended up being a bit singed, only adding to the ragged appearance that the previously inflicted cuts gave it. Idly she noticed that a more bombastic action-oriented music had started playing. Seeing that the dragon was still recovering from using its fire breath, she closed the distance and slashed at the back of its hind leg, aiming to hamstring it. The dragon roared with pain and fury as her sword cut through the weaker scales on the back of its leg and retaliated by kicking back with that very same leg. Not expecting it to be so fast, she was hit full on and sent flying. Kerasuba rubbed briefly at her aching chest, glad to find that no ribs were broken, though she would probably have a bruise extending across the entire front of her body soon. If that leg had been in a better position to kick her, she'd have been dead. She was allowed no more respite than that as another, smaller fire blast was sent her way, forcing her to dodge it again. She tried to rush at its other leg only to yelp and frantically dodge as a rapid series of small fire blasts tried to roast her. Apparently the dragon could manipulate the intensity of its breath attack and it was being disturbingly intelligent about it. Finally it ran out of air to power its attacks and she took the opportunity to charge at it. This time, she anticipated the attack from its front legs and weaved around it. No matter how incongruously fast it was for its size, she was still a lot faster. Instead of going for the other hind leg, she lashed out at the leg that had just tried to squash her, cutting through its massive tendons with some effort. Instead of speeding away and exposing herself to its fire breath again, she stayed close in and dodged around its clumsy attacks. If the mythological beast wasn't crippled on two of its legs, this would have been suicidal, but now it was doable, as long as she wasn't directly under it, where it could simply lower its body and squash her. Kerasuba was able to keep herself safe with only minor difficulty, as the dragon was heavily favoring its crippled legs. Once she was in position, she inflicted a much larger gash on its uninjured front leg, causing it to crumple forward as it was no longer able to support itself. Taking the opportunity, she propelled herself upwards, opening a massive slash in its long, serpentine neck. The dragon let out a dying roar and struggled to stay upright, but Kerasuba could clearly see that it was on its last legs, barely able to even keep its eyes open, as the huge wound she'd just given it bled a veritable waterfall of blood. Breathing heavily with both exertion and a sense of victory, she smirked at the dying beast. Just goes to show that size isn't everything. She saw the tail only a moment before it smashed into her, having let her guard down. The force behind the blow sent her flying into the wall, while her sword clattered to the ground, having been torn from her grasp when she'd been struck. Slowly and very painfully, Kerasuba got back on her feet, holding her right arm with her left and limping on her right leg. Both her front and back were screaming in pain, and her thigh felt as if the bone had cracked. Her right arm was most definitely broken and would be no good for any kind of sword work until it healed. There were also several gashes along her stomach from the bone spikes on its tail, but they were fortunately not very deep. She was injured badly enough that she wouldn't be finished healing for a few days at least, which was very bad, as she doubted that she had a few days to lounge around. Berating herself for being stupid enough to let her guard down around an enemy that wasn't fully dead, she looked towards where her sword should be, and her face fell in dismay. The titanic, multi-ton head had apparently decided to fall on that exact spot. She glared into the still-living dragon's serpentine eyes until they closed and the pained breathing of the beast stopped. There was no way in hell that she would be able to lift that thing to get her sword out from under it. She wouldn't have been able to do it even if she was fully healed. But the metallic rattle, a portcullis opened on the side and she limped slowly towards it, having no choice but to leave her sword there. Several painful minutes later, she came upon a mid-sized room that looked more like the laboratory of some mad wizard than anything else. Of particular interest were two items sitting innocently on a large desk. One was a sword, an adachi to be exact, and rather conveniently of the exact length and shape of her previous one. The only difference was the fact that it had a white hilt with the image of a snarling dragon head carved on the very end of it. Grasping it with her good hand, she noted that it was made of bone and felt rather comfortable to the touch. Unsheathing the blade, she was pleased to see that the blade was actually of considerably higher quality than her last one. "Well done, little crow, I'll admit that I was expecting you to get yourself killed fighting my dragon," he complimented. "It may interest you to know that there was no need to fight him. If you'd simply asked to pass through, he would have let you." "You mean that thing could understand me?" Kerasuba asked in shock, remembering that the dragon had been rather clever with its fire breath before she'd killed it. "In a manner of speaking. I don't know how to create true life, and neither am I interested in doing so right now, but creating creatures that can obey simple commands isn't too hard. They're nothing more than flesh and blood machines really, but it's something. It was also the main reason that Kerasuba had been able to win her fight against the dragon. It was stupid as because he didn't have a lot of time to program it with anything more than breathe fire, smash with legs and tail. The idea of using several smaller fire blasts had been about the extent of his cleverness on short notice. Are you going to tell me where the hell this place is now? I can't believe that a place like this wouldn't have been noticed by people, not to mention that no one would have built this castle in the middle of nowhere. Kerasuba questioned. You're assuming that there are any people here. Naruto pointed out with amusement. Kerasuba had the distinct impression that here was not referring to the castle. Just stop circling around the subject and tell me where we are already. She demanded impatiently. Oh fine, but only because you look so delicious in that ripped up outfit. Naruto conceded with a leer. We are in my personal dimension. Aside from the castle and the mountains, nothing exists here. There is only gravity because I will it, there is only air because I will it. Everything here exists only because I want it to exist. I use this place to play around with various ideas, and I thought it would be funny to make you do a dungeon run, though I had to do a bit of rushed improvising on the traps and monsters. You're telling me that you're a god here? Kerasuba asked skeptically, still not entirely certain that she believed what he was saying. Well, I'm a god everywhere, but playing around like this in an inhabited dimension would be a bad idea. I can't just go collapsing one of those if I create some monumental up. You know I don't really believe you. Kerasuba said after a moment of silence. That's alright, you don't have to. Naruto responded casually and then suddenly flew at her with his sword drawn. Kerasuba barely blocked the strike because of its speed and the surprise attack nature of it, and even that was only because she'd never really let her guard down. Over their locked blades, Naruto leered at the silver-haired Seikirei again. But you should believe that you'll be losing what's left of your clothes if you don't win this fight. With that, the interrupted sword fight between them was renewed. They fought all across the throne room, each putting every bit of skill they had to bear against the other. Naruto had gotten a good feel for the level of her speed and strength in their earlier battle, and was restraining himself accordingly to make sure that only skill with a blade would decide the winner. Kerasuba didn't let his threat rattle her and kept herself utterly focused on the battle. She needed the focus because he truly was the best swordsman she'd ever fought. The few spars against Miya had always ended up being decided by the purple-haired Sekirei's superior power rather than skill with a blade, though Kerasuba had to grudgingly admit that it would have still likely ended with her loss. At least then, she wasn't so sure if it would be the same now, as Miya had spent years pretending to be a human while she had kept training. In spite of being threatened with rape if she lost, or perhaps even because of it, she rapidly started getting aroused to an even greater degree than before. This was the kind of battle that she had been yearning for, one where everything was put at stake. If she won, then she would get the of gutting this infuriating man, and if she lost, she would either die or apparently be raped. The danger of it excited her like nothing else possibly could. The matchup seemed fairly even at first, but it eventually began turning to Naruto's favor. Kerasuba was by far the most skilled sword user he'd ever fought, but he had too many advantages over her. She had very rarely fought a sword user that was her equal or better, while he had the stolen memories of Hashirama to draw on, a man that had fought against his near equally powerful rival Madara countless times, and Hashirama had used swords in those fights often, even if it was not an adachi. Both Naruto and Kerasuba were rapidly learning new tricks and figuring out the tricks of the other during their battle, but Naruto was learning faster. Additionally, he was also a far superior hand-to-hand combatant than Kerasuba, which gave him another edge. The final advantage was his greater size and thus reach as well as strength, though it was a minor advantage in comparison to the other two. Naruto went for a diagonal slash, which Kerasuba blocked, but was forced to give ground as his leg lashed out to strike at her sides. She had quickly learned to avoid a taijutsu battle, as she was sure to lose it. She already had several painful bruises to prove it. Trying to take advantage of his extended leg, she slashed at it while simultaneously moving forward to close the distance. Naruto surprised her by twisting his body around her blade so that he ended up supporting himself off the ground with just one hand. For a moment, Kerasuba thought that she might be able to take his hand off at the wrist as her blade was heading right for it, but he pushed away from the ground and over her sword, catching her right across the face with his knee as he did so. Kerasuba was sent flying away, but managed to catch herself on the wall instead of smashing into it. What incredible movement. He could have easily lost a limb trying to pull that off, but he timed it perfectly and didn't lose his balance for even a moment. She thought to herself as she wiped some blood away from her mouth. Firmly gripping her new Nadachi, she launched herself at him and started a ferocious attack that forced him on the defensive. After performing a triple feint, she managed to score a slash across his leg, though she took a fist to the stomach right after. Coughing because of the force behind the blow, she was glad that he hadn't followed up with another attack. She wouldn't have been able to defend herself too well if he had. That was nicely done. Naruto complimented. In the interest of keeping it fair, I'm blocking my regeneration from healing this wound. How generous of you. Kerasuba said sarcastically, irritated beyond measure that he actually had to hold back to keep things fair, not having the slightest idea just how much he was truly holding back. After that short exchange, battle was rejoined, Kerasuba having to ignore the pain of many minor bruises and the one very serious one on her stomach, while Naruto was favoring his slashed right leg. Neither one was a stranger to fighting while in pain and were able to continue the battle for some minutes longer. Soon though, it became obvious that Kerasuba was slowing down. Not only were her cumulative injuries taking their toll, but her arms had started burning with exertion some time ago. The force that Naruto had been putting behind his blows was nothing to sneer at, and there were only so many times that she could block before her arms could take no more. She kept on fighting with as much desperate strength as she could muster, but the battle ended when her guard was smashed aside because she no longer had the strength to maintain it. Immediately after, an open palm strike hit her chest hard enough that she felt her ribs crack and was sent flying into the wall back first. Shakily, she picked herself up, keeping a firm grip on her sword and pointing it at him, though she knew that she was going to lose. Naruto approached her slowly, with a slight limp as he still hadn't allowed his leg to heal, taking note of her harsh breathing and shaking hands. He was highly surprised when the silver-haired woman did the sensible thing and attempted to retreat instead of continuing a battle that she was certain to lose. He'd been certain that it would never even cross her mind no matter what he threatened her with. She had no chance of actually making good on her escape of course, but it was the principle of the thing. Kerasuba felt that she had a good chance of getting away as long as she made it through the portal. The idea of retreat galled her, and she wouldn't be particularly unreceptive to the prospect of being taken by this extraordinarily powerful warrior that had completely defeated her, but it just wasn't in her nature to give in. She was actually rather ambivalent to the idea of it was something that had never really interested her. The only time she ever got aroused was during a good fight, which meant that she was highly aroused at the moment and found the horned man quite attractive because of it, but that didn't mean she was just going to let him do whatever he wanted to her. She jumped through the portal and fell to the ground on the other side when it ended up being closer than expected. Before she could get up and figure out where exactly she was, Naruto came through after her and grabbed her by the hair with one hand and an arm with the other. Before she could react, she was lifted and pressed cheek first against a wall with Naruto's body pushing into her from behind. She had time to notice that they were on a rooftop again and she was being pressed against the entrance to the stairway that allowed access to said roof for people who weren't capable of roof jumping. Naughty girl, trying to run away like that. Naruto purred into her ear and rather deliberately ground his crotch against her ass. He had a suspicion about Kerasuba that he wanted to confirm. The Seikirei in question maintained a stony silence and waited for him to tear her clothing off. She was pinned and too tired to keep fighting. If he wanted to do what he had implied he would do, it would be exceedingly easy at this point. Despite it all, her panties were liberally soaked due to the arousal she'd experienced in the fight. Honestly, she was regretting the fact that she'd allowed Natsuo to wing her. At the time she'd done it because she knew that the homo leader of the disciplinary squad hated the world just like she did and he wouldn't annoy her with any kind of attempts to get into her panties. But having just fought the most exhilarating battle of her life, she wished that she could get winged by the horned man whose name she had never actually gotten. They could fight like this every day, and if he really could create any kind of environment he wished as he had claimed, then that opened so many fun possibilities. Being winged so forcefully after being defeated in battle would actually be her idea of romantic. Besides, the power boost that she had been supposed to gain from having an Ashikabi had been minimal, barely noticeable in fact. She suspected it had something to do with the fact that neither she nor Natsuo could care less about each other. Or it could be because Takedo had been her adjuster and he'd done something different from the others, something that Manaka hadn't liked too much. Here I was, about to offer you an unwinging and you run away. Naruto crooned and extended his tongue to an errant drop of blood from the corner of her mouth. Kerasuba froze in shock, her arousal mounting again as the idea penetrated into her mind. If her winging to that little pussy Natsuo could be broken, then there would be nothing in the way of getting winged to the horned man currently pinning her to the wall. I suppose I shouldn't force it on you if you want to stay winged so badly, but I think I'll be taking a little something as a victory prize either way. Kerasuba tried to speak up, tried to say that she wanted to be unwinged, but all that came out of her mouth was a strained cry between and pain as he sank his teeth into her shoulder and pressed against her throbbing groin more insistently. "You're pretty tasty little crow," he murmured into her ear. "It was fun, make sure to come see me if you want to go another round." Upon saying that, he released her and teleported away, leaving Kerasuba to fall to her knees, still leaning against the wall. The silver-haired Seikirei forced down a whimper as her painfully aroused body protested the sudden absence. She was actually still a virgin, but right now she wanted to be Ed so badly that it wasn't even funny. She didn't want gentleness, she wanted him to come back, unwing her and then take her right up against this wall, and she wanted him to be rough about it. Bing bastard. She cursed, suddenly realizing that this had probably been planned. He'd been entirely too knowledgeable about her and could have conceivably known how to push her buttons just right. In spite of that, she couldn't hold back a smile as she got back on her feet and began making her way back. It had been a glorious battle, and she had probably learned more about sword fighting than she would have over years of training. Even if he had pulled a hugely dick move by getting her so completely turned on and then leaving her high and dry, it had been the best day of her life. She knew that she was mostly pissed off over the fact that he'd manipulated the situation in such a way that she would be forced to ask him to unwing her, making her swallow her pride in order to do it. She'd have to act as if they were friends, which was exactly what he'd said they'd be, the infuriating bastard. The same for another fight really, because she doubted that the same approach would work twice. But she would do it, she knew that she would. It had simply been too amazing for her not to do it. Naruto grinned to himself as he watched Kerasuba jump off, being careful not to jostle her injuries too much. That had been loads of fun, especially considering the fact that he'd kind of done the whole dungeon thing on a whim. Maybe he should make more of these dungeon things and drop people in them. Shaking his head and mentally kicking himself for the idea, he put it aside. Playing with unsuspecting mortals like that was a good way to go way deeper into the asshole side of godhood than he wanted to. Now if they agreed to it, that would be something else entirely. Either way he had a more immediate problem to take care of. Namely, his barely in control arousal. He'd been a hair's breadth away from taking the silver-haired Seikirei right up against that wall. The smell of her arousal had been teasing him for their entire fight, and knowing that she actually wanted it made it seriously hard to resist, but this was better. Kerasuba was almost guaranteed to come back for more, and frustrating her might be worth a few laughs. He wondered how long she would last before she got royally pissed off at him for messing with her like this. But that was all for the future, right now he needed to get back to his wife. With this in mind, he teleported over to her and wasted no time grabbing her and kissing her. She was only slightly surprised by his forceful approach, having felt his arousal through their bond and returned it eagerly. Not wanting to bother with making their way to the bedroom by foot, he simply teleported the both of them there, disposing of their clothes on the way. He quickly nibbled his way down her collarbone and to one of her, seizing it with his and pulling at it, her soft at the action, almost causing him just get right to the main event instead of building up to it. Xanda took a quick peek into his mind to see what had him so aroused and smirked at what he'd done to Kerasuba. That might end up being amusing. Getting an idea of her own, she pushed him on his back and settled herself on top of him in a 69 position. Naruto was perfectly happy with that and instantly inserted his tongue inside her, groaning in at the taste of her. Meanwhile, Xanda observed the steel-hard evidence of his arousal and decided to be mean. While he was working his tongue inside her with furious intensity, hers wrapped slowly around him and squeezed slowly, pulling on his member ever so slightly. Naruto groaned into her opening and all but vibrated with a desire for her to do something more, which she refused to do, instead continuing her tortuously slow actions that did nothing to give him the relief he was looking for but made his arousal all the worse. Trying to provoke her into doing more, he used his tongue to deliver an electric shock to her nerves, making her cry out in at the act and instinctively tighten her tongue around his member. Seeing that it worked, he continued delivering occasional electric shocks. Some minutes later, Xanda was breathing heavily and finally lowered her mouth over him slowly until his entire length was in her mouth and down her throat. Naruto kept up an almost continuous growl as his wife applied an incredibly pleasurable suction to his aching manhood. Meanwhile, he kept up his own end, trying his best not to become distracted by what she was doing to him. Having been far more aroused than her when they started, he didn't last too much longer and released explosively into her throat. He didn't manage to stay focused on what he should be doing with his own tongue while she swallowed down his release and ate up the last few drops but got himself back under control before she could get irritated with his slacking off. Xanda raised herself up and turned so that she could grab onto his horns while he finished her with his tongue, which happened only a couple of minutes later. Just as she had done, Naruto eagerly swallowed all of her release, finding it to be as delicious as ever. "I see you're ready for more," she murmured once her orgasm had subsided, seeing that he was once more standing at attention. "A lot more," he growled back eagerly. "It looks like you've got some competition for the position as guardian of unwinged Seikirei." Takami answered with some irony in her voice. "You wouldn't happen to be talking about the horned juggernaut that's stomping all over the city, are you?" Hamura asked suspiciously. He'd seen the video of that one Ashikabi getting hurled into the MBI tower and heard on the news about the more recent event when he'd apparently used the city as an obstacle course for some ice sliding. "The very same, his name is Uzumaki Naruto by the way." Takami confirmed, not at all surprised that Hamura had heard of him already. Low profile the horned man was not. I went to talk to him and determined that he and his wife, whose name is still unknown, are basically here on a whim because he wants to adopt a few little sisters and has apparently decided that the Seikirei are perfect for that purpose. That's all he wants? Homura asked dubiously, thinking it unlikely that anyone could take a look at the Seikirei and have that kind of idea. Seems like it. Takami answered with a shrug and then continued uneasily. Though I can't be sure, and both of them are vicious in the extreme when something happens that they don't like. That sounded a lot more plausible to the fire Seikirei. Though the little sister angle still threw him, he wasn't at all surprised to hear that the newcomers weren't very nice people. Like throwing an ashikabi into a building hard enough to make him explode? He asked dryly. They've done more than that. Takami said with a snort. After he did that, his wife somehow managed to appear in Manaka's office without tripping a single alarm and ripped off 8 of his fingers. And just like that, Homura's opinion of them skyrocketed. He hated Manaka with a passion, and hearing that something bad had happened to the insane president of MBI always made his day a little better. Why only 8? He asked curiously. Apparently she thought it would be funny to leave him with just his pinkies. I get the feeling that Manaka is only alive right now because they think it'll be more fun to kill him by degrees. She told him dryly. Had something like this happened even a few years ago, her reaction would have been far stronger, but Manaka had quite honestly become rather unbearable ever since his insane Seikirei plan had started. Homura was forced to agree, the thought of Manaka with just his pinkies was pretty funny. On top of that, she apparently also read his mind and helped herself to all of the information he had on the Seikirei, casually took the remaining 7 jinki that MBI had in their vault and took the bodies of the deactivated Seikirei. What? Homura asked numbly, hardly able to believe that someone was able to so cavalierly walk all over MBI and its protections. What about the disciplinary squad? Didn't they try to stop her? It would be pretty hard to stop someone that can apparently teleport at will. Takami shrugged. She'd been shocked about it at first too, but she'd had some time to get used to it since then. Not to mention that I doubt they could have stopped her either way. What do you mean? Kerasuba went out looking for Uzumaki and found him. What happened? Homura half expected to hear that the horned man had been killed, though he wasn't sure just how powerful he was. Kerasuba wouldn't talk about it, her clothes were torn to shreds, and she had a new sword. I'm pretty sure that she lost badly, but she was strangely upbeat about it. Just what the hell are these two anyway? Homura asked mostly to himself. Takami hesitated, looking nervous, and Homura noticed it. You know something? He said that he was a god. A god? Homura said with high amounts of skepticism. Yeah, that was my reaction too, so he created a citywide lightning storm to make his point. Wait, that freak storm the other day, that only lasted for half a minute was him? Homura said in alarmed realization. Yes. Takami confirmed. Look, it doesn't matter either way whether he's a god or not, the fact of the matter is that he's insanely powerful, both of them are. They've already unwinged one Seikirei and intend to do it to others. What? How? The fire Seikirei burst out, having never imagined that such a thing was possible. There were a lot of Seikirei that he'd failed to protect from unscrupulous ashikabi that wanted to wing them against their will, and this could be something that would allow those girls a second chance. Takami had to smile a bit at the usually serious man losing his composure like that. I have no idea how, and I doubt they'll be forthcoming with that information, but that's not why I'm telling you about this. That got Homura's attention, and he focused his full attention on Takami. If they can so casually unwing a Seikirei, then they might be able to help you with your own little problem. Takami had long been worried about Homura's unstable Seikirei core, but unable to do anything about it. She theorized that an ashikabi bond might stabilize it, but there was no way to be sure until it happened. Homura had fought so hard to protect the unwinged Seikirei, while they searched for the right person to bond with, at her behest no less. The least she could do was point him in the direction of someone that could help him. Even though Naruto was dangerous beyond all doubt, he seemed benign enough to people who weren't scum. And you think they'd help me out, just like that? Homura asked skeptically. I'm not sure about the woman, but Uzumaki gave me the impression that he was a basically decent guy despite his quirks, as long as you don't do something to make him angry, at which point he apparently uses you as a living projectile. How comforting. Homura muttered to himself sarcastically. I'll keep it in mind in case I ever get desperate enough to ask them for help, though Mia seems to think they'll be paying Izumo in a visit eventually anyway. Takami felt a chunk of ice drop into her gut at the thought of Mia clashing with either of the horned duo. She had no idea how they stacked up against each other power-wise, but she sincerely doubted there would be anything left of the city if they fought. She didn't for a second consider that they might get along. Mia's rather prudish attitude in the same room with Naruto and his gaggle of perverts was just asking for a catastrophe. I really hope that doesn't happen, she said ominously. Why? Homura asked, honestly confused. Because Uzumaki is a pervert and completely shameless about it, I even got a report about a public incident happening just before he killed that Ashikabi. Even worse, Akitsu seems to be going in that direction herself and his wife probably isn't exactly the model of proper behavior either. If they ever go there, it's going to be like a carnival of everything that makes Mia angry. Oh. Yeah, Himura could see the incoming disaster just as clearly as she could. He might not know them, but he somehow doubted that Uzumaki and his wife were the type to meekly do things Mia's way. Manaka was troubled. Why, he would even go so far as to say that he was upset. His missing fingers bothered him quite a bit since the cybernetic ones were far less flexible than real ones, not to mention the lack of feeling in them, but that was not the main cause of his ire. No, the cause of his problems were the two unknowns that were blatantly flaunting the rules of the Seikirei plan. Didn't they understand that it was needed in order to determine who was fit to ascend? But what could he do? His attempt to gather information had already backfired horribly, costing him the Jinki and the bodies of the deactivated Seikirei, not to mention his fingers. Above all else, he needed to retrieve those or else he would have no prizes to offer as the game progressed. The kami had told him what she had learned, but he did not believe it. The new age of the gods had not arrived yet, why would there be two gods here already? Just as to Kami, he also suspected that Kerasuba had encountered Uzumaki Naruto and been defeated, but that in and of itself did not trouble him as much as the apparent consequences of this event. The Black Seikirei had been acting odd ever since then. She'd been almost pleasant. There were far fewer terrified to death employees cowering in the toilets or asking to be reassigned elsewhere. She seemed to be getting back to her old self as the days passed, but it was still troubling. And unwinging a bonded Seikirei. Honestly, that was almost like reversing the Seikirei plan, and thus even more unacceptable than ignoring the rules. Possibly by far the worst of all, every single tracker in every single Seikirei had mysteriously stopped working recently. He had no idea how they had done it, but it was intolerable. Those trackers were crucial in order to keep track of the little birds to make sure they didn't scatter to the winds. It was possible to keep track of them by other means, but it was 100 times more difficult and time-consuming, and some were bound to slip through the cracks. Not to mention the extra feature in those trackers that allowed him to use a signal generated by their MBI cards to deactivate them at any time. They needed to be punished, and Manaka already knew that only removal from the game would suffice, anything less, and they would simply retaliate again. After all, no matter how strong or fast they were, they would have trouble surviving a sniper round to the head. Even Mia would have trouble with that, no matter how powerful she was. Though Manaka was silently glad that he hadn't needed to resort to that because Mia had removed herself from the Seikirei plan. There was always the chance of failure and it would be disastrous if that happened. Unfortunately, these newcomers were not so courteous and he had to risk it. Kerasuba had wrestled with herself over this for days, ever since their fight in fact. Her pride had warred with her desires, and as the days passed, her pride became less and less important. It wasn't like she had to do anything huge anyway, it just rankled that she had to ask for something instead of taking it. That battle had been the most intense and exciting thing she'd ever experienced, and she wanted more of it. No longer could she tolerate the stale routine of patrolling the city and looking for the weaklings that decided they didn't want anything to do with the game, or the loonies that thought using their Seikirei to bully the other humans was fun, not that she paid too much attention to the latter group. What she wanted was to feel the burn of her muscles as she struggled against a powerful opponent, to hear the clanging of swords and see the spray of blood as flesh was parted by steel. To that end, she'd come here, to this incredibly, ridiculously expensive hotel to pay a visit to the man that could give her those things. She had no real idea how she was going to go about actually asking him for that, but she'd think of something. There was always plan B, which was to simply attack him and see what happened. She'd learned his name in the meantime, so that minor issue was settled and there'd be no need for introductions. The only thing left to do was approach him again. Course of action decided, she marched up to the door and knocked on it, already feeling the familiar excitement in her gut at the nearness of another battle. "Come in." Naruto's voice called from within. Kerasuba did so and stopped in surprise at the sight that greeted her. They'd clearly done some remodeling if the multiple TV screens were any clue. Each of them was connected to a gaming console that was in turn being occupied by someone. Ishima and Akitsu she knew only from reading their profiles in the past few days while she gathered information on Naruto. There was Naruto himself of course, along with the still unknown horned woman who had ever so casually removed Manaka's fingers, though she hadn't thought that she would be the type to play video games. The real surprise was the presence of a familiar face in the group. "Hey Hane, what are you doing here?" Hi senpai." The blue Seikirei greeted nervously before answering. "Well, Naruto invited me over to play a few games." "Naruto also just cut your head off because you weren't paying attention," the man in question taunted. "Hey. No fair." Heihain protested and turned her attention back to her own monitor. "Hey there little crow." Naruto greeted the bemused Kerasuba belatedly, not taking his eyes off the screen as he was too busy fighting Akitsu. This game that Heihain had suggested really was worth the effort to set up multiple screens and consoles, even if they did have to vandalize the hotel a bit to make room. At this point, Xana growled ferociously and ended up burning her controller to nothing with the cursed black fires of Amaterasu, obviously angered by the fact that she'd been bested. "Sorry," Yoshima squeaked, terrified by the display of rage and power. "No need to apologize, Yoshima," Naruto assured, garnering himself a dirty look from his wife, who had been enjoying the terror she'd inspired in the Seikirei that dared get the better of her inside the game. "Come on now Xana, it's just a game. No need to get so angry," he soothed, putting down his controller and moving to rub her shoulders. Xana let out an indistinct mutter but allowed herself to be pacified. She was not accustomed to losing and did not enjoy the feeling, even if it was at something as silly as a video game. If she could have, she would have definitely cheated to force a victory, but attempting to change the rules of a video game with her power was more likely to burn out the electronics than anything else. Who'd have thought that warping reality would be easier than cheating at a game? Kerasuba observed all of this with an odd look on her face, not sure what to think. This Xana was obviously powerful, and she felt the familiar urge to fight her just as she did with all powerful people, but something warned her that any attempt to challenge her wouldn't result in a fight but in execution. Either way, it was very strange to see them participating in something so frivolous. She'd have thought that such powerful people would have better things to do with their time than play video games, but apparently not. "So, what can we do for you little crow?" Naruto asked once things had calmed down. The game was clearly over as they'd have to plug in a new controller for Xana. Kerasuba twitched at the nickname but didn't verbally protest it. He'd beaten her already, and she wouldn't be able to demand that he stop calling her that until she beat him as well. "I came for another fight," she stated, resting her hand on the hilt of her sword. "That's cute," he responded, making her twitch again. She was not cute. "But I'm afraid it's going to have to wait for a little while, we were just about to have dinner. You're free to join us though." Kerasuba opened her mouth to reject the offer out of sheer instinct before stopping herself. It's not like she had anywhere better to be and she still wanted that fight. "Alright. Is the food for the penthouse finished yet?" a young man asked one of the hotel chefs impatiently. "Not yet, should be done in 10 minutes. The chef responded, never taking his eyes away from the food. "Come on man, hurry it up," the same young man said insistently. "Keep your socks on boy, do you have any idea how much food we've had to make?" A different older chef snarked back irritably. "They've even got 2 guests today, apparently with the same appetites." Despite his irritable tone, the old chef liked the people currently occupying the penthouse, as every real chef liked cooking for people with a big appetite. Most of the time, that room was only used by pompous assholes that didn't do anything but complain, and when they ran out of things to complain about, they made up more things to complain about. These people, however, appreciated the work that the hotel staff did in keeping them comfortable up there and let them know it. That was the reason that the bellop was so impatient actually, he was looking forward to the hefty tip that was almost guaranteed to be given once the food was delivered. 3 of them would be needed to cart all of the food up there tonight, and all of them were obviously barely holding their impatience in check. The old chef couldn't blame them really, he'd have been ecstatic over a big influx of money at their age too. "So, why was that one guy looking so annoyed that we were excited to be carrying the food here?" a female bellop asked in confusion as she pushed her own table full of food along the hallway. She'd only just gotten the job and was excited to be bringing the food to the apparently highly generous people using the penthouse. "Penta's a die-hard Christian," one of her 2 male companions said as if that explained everything. "What's that got to do with anything?" she asked, even more confused. "Don't get me wrong, Kent is a good guy and doesn't try to force his religion on anyone, but he's convinced that the couple in the penthouse are demons and it pisses him off that nobody takes him seriously," he explained. "Why would he think they were demons?" she asked further, giving her colleague a very odd look. "You'll see," the other male bellop asked with a snicker, making the woman a bit nervous. Soon after they made it to the door and knocked with the customary call of room service. The door was opened and the female bellop jumped back with a little squeak of a scream. "Hey guys," Naruto greeted, paying the reaction no mind. It was hardly the first time after all. "Hey Naruto." They greeted back with a fist bump. He'd long since told them not to bother with politeness, which they were fine with. He was the coolest rich guy they'd ever heard of. After this was done, Naruto turned his eyes on the slowly calming down woman and grinned. "And you even brought a stripper this time, you guys are the best." "Well, we figured that you didn't have enough hot women around," the younger one joked, taking a peek inside to see that as had been speculated, the 2 guests were also hot women. The woman was both indignant and embarrassed by the crass insinuation and spluttered, "Hey, I'm not a stripper. You're if you want to be. Don't be afraid to live the dream," Naruto encouraged, drawing snickers from the men. The poor girl didn't know how to react and settled for glaring with a completely red face. She wanted to throw out a few choice insults, but it had been repeatedly drilled into her that she couldn't be impolite to the guests no matter what. "Sorry about that, I like dirty jokes," Naruto told her with another grin after a few seconds of awkwardness. "Here, take this," he said and handed her a wad of cash, which she took with wide eyes. She continued staring stupidly at the huge tip while Naruto handed them out to her two colleagues as well. "Hey, come on, let's go," the older of the two male Bellup said to her and touched her arm to snap her out of her daze. "There's more money here than I'll make in a month," she said numbly. "Well, you'll have to give half of that to the chefs, but I know what you mean." Naruto doesn't really pay attention to the size of his tips, that's why there's a waiting period between us Bellups on who gets to bring food up here. If this keeps up for a few months longer, I'll be able to buy my own house. And Kenta thinks they're demons because of the horns in the eyes and stuff. "Pretty much," was the response, accompanied by a shrug. "We don't know what's up with that, but as far as we're concerned, there's just one less person in line for the huge tips, so it makes us happy, and if Naruto is a demon, then he's the nicest demon I've ever heard of, even if his grin makes me think of a velociraptor. Though, that wife of his," the other one said with a dramatic shudder. "I hear you, man, she answered the door for me once and I felt like crapping my pants. Didn't get a tip that day either. I wonder what Naruto sees in her. He's such a cool guy, and she's, well, not to be rude, but she's a bit of a bitch." The last part was said in a barely audible whisper, even though they were halfway down to the ground floor in the elevator already. The absolute last thing he wanted to do was offend the guy that was rapidly making him rich by insulting his wife. "Well, I don't know what your girlfriend sees in you either, but it clearly has to be something," was the philosophical response. Kerasuba was once more bemused as she observed the eating habits of everyone around her. Naruto was true to his brutish appearance this time and apparently had no use for table manners, or else had never heard of the term. He ate much too quickly, slurped his soup right from the bowl, took large bites of everything, only bothered with utensils when it wasn't too inconvenient, and appeared to take an absurd amount of and using his fang teeth to murder the meat. Anna, whose imperious presence and appearance would make you think she would be well-mannered while eating, was only slightly better about it. Kerasuba hadn't heard her crushing any chicken bones between her teeth yet anyway. By contrast, Akitsu appeared highly cultured and ate gracefully, though it was possible that that was just a consequence of the fact that she liked doing things slowly. At a formal, high-class dinner, she'd probably still stick out like a sore thumb, but when she was sitting next to the two food exterminators, she might as well be royalty in the manners department. Ishima, Heihain and Kerasuba herself were somewhere in the middle, eating quickly but with passable manners. Rather a lot like most Seikirei actually. "So, Heihain, how about you let me unwing you? A pretty girl like you shouldn't be bonded to a man that's more interested in sausages than melons," Naruto asked as the dinner wound down. Heihain blushed slightly but still tried to defend her ashikabi. "But Natsuo-sama is the leader of the disciplinary squad and besides," she trailed off with her blush deepening slightly. She might not be as open about her infatuation with Natsuo as Benit Tsubasa, but she did still have feelings for him. "Oh come on, you know those feelings are fake, if it wasn't for the bond you wouldn't look at him twice, and the disciplinary squad isn't even needed anymore either," Naruto argued. "Wait, what do you mean the disciplinary squad isn't needed anymore?" Kerasuba interrupted. "I meant exactly what I said, it's not needed anymore, it serves no further purpose, it is obsolete." Kerasuba opened her mouth to press for more information, but Xana took over the explanation. "What he means is that the Seikirei plan is defunct no matter what Manaka thinks. The only plans for the Seikirei that matter now are ours." "Really?" Kerasuba asked skeptically. She didn't particularly care about their plans for the Seikirei, just like she hadn't cared about Manaka's. All she wanted was to fight and maybe see the world burn in the process. "Really? Manaka is only alive because it will be amusing to watch him flounder uselessly," Xana asserted. Well, Kerasuba could certainly appreciate that kind of viciousness, but that still didn't make the disciplinary squad unnecessary. "How does that make us unneeded? Seikirei and Ashikabi pairs will still try to escape the city, and you'll need them here if you have your own plans for the Seikirei." "No we don't, and aren't you even going to ask what that plan is?" Naruto asked curiously. "I wouldn't care even if you're intending to wipe us all out or use us for world domination, as long as you give me a good fight," Kerasuba stated flatly, hands itching for her sword. She wanted the damn fight that she'd come here for already, and she was getting impatient. "You found a real gem in this one husband," Xana chuckled. "I know, she's something else," Naruto agreed with a snicker, much to Kerasuba's continued irritation. She kind of missed the days when everyone was scared shitless of her. In a rare moment of reflection, she realized that the problem with having powerful people to fight was that they wouldn't hesitate to poke fun at you. Akitsu lowered her head ever so slightly, feeling upset. She didn't want to be overshadowed by the black Seikirei. It didn't seem fair to her that the more emotive Kerasuba would take her place as the master's favorite. If she had been someone else, she would have sighed despondently, but as it was she just silently lamented her coming loss of position and reflected that it had been nice to be special for a little while. And then suddenly she was being pulled into a one-armed hug and spoken to in an admonishing tone. None of that now, Akitsu, you're not allowed to mope. Yes, master. The Seikirei said, perking up as much as her unexpressive demeanor allowed, settled her head on his lap contently and closed her eyes when he started scratching her head. She's like a cat. Yashima muttered, getting amused nods from everyone except Kerasuba, who was debating the merits of simply going with plan B. So, how about that unwinging? Naruto asked pointedly, staring at Heihain. The blue Seikirei fidgeted uncertainly. It was true that Natsuko was as gay as anyone could get and had zero interest in any of his three Seikirei, which Heihain knew wasn't likely to change, no matter how much Tsubasa tried to convince herself otherwise. On top of that, he didn't care about them as people either. To him, they were just part of the job. If it helps you make the decision, you should know that your reaction to him was artificially induced by Manaka. What? Heihain asked in shock, her head snapping towards the horned blonde. How is that possible? A lot of things are possible. Naruto responded blandly. Heihain frowned, leaning heavily towards accepting his offer of unwinging in light of this new information. Naruto hadn't struck her as the type to lie, and if he really wanted to, he could have simply unwinged her without permission, like had been done to Yashima. Alright, unwing me. Naruto grinned and did so, laying his hand across her chest, much to her embarrassment. You wouldn't happen to be willing to call me Ani-chan, would you? Maybe if you beat me at Mortal Kombat. She replied cheekily. He'd so far failed to do that spectacularly. Fair enough. Naruto agreed. You'll be my little sister in no time. Now can we get to the fight already? Kerasuba growled, already sliding her new dragon bone hilt sword from its sheath. On a full stomach. Kerasuba growled again. You're stalling. Well, you're pretty cute when you're angry. Naruto responded with a grin, still petting Akitsu's head. Kerasuba's eyebrow was twitching in anger by now, and the urge to simply attack him was becoming overwhelming. She was just about to do it when her sword suddenly refused to leave its sheath any further than it had already. Calm down and behave yourself. Xana said mildly before commenting. Such an ill-mannered girl. The black Seikirei had to struggle mightily not to point out the fact that she and Naruto were not in any position to talk about others being ill-mannered, considering their eating habits. Something was still telling her not to cross the horned woman. She had no fear of an enemy more powerful than her, but she didn't like the idea of dying without even a fight. Unlike Naruto, Xana wasn't likely to humor her by fighting at her level. Not to worry, little crow, you'll get your fight, just be patient. Naruto assured. I hear patience is a virtue anyway. Alright, now you'll be getting your long-awaited fight. Naruto said as he and Kerasuba stood on the roof of a random building. Well, draw your sword already then. The Seikirei in question said impatiently, already holding her sword and pointing it at him. Don't be silly, we're not going to fight here, too many civilian casualties. Naruto scolded and continued to stand there with a contemplative expression. I'm trying to think of what kind of environment to create for us. Just pick something already, it doesn't matter. Kerasuba retorted. She'd honestly forgotten about his scruples with collateral damage. Target is in sight, how about yours? A man that had Naruto's forehead in the crosshair of his high-powered sniper rifle spoke calmly. They had both been rather miffed that they'd been too late to take their shots earlier, but the shot right now was as perfect as it could get. There was minimal wind, no bystanders and absolutely nothing that could foul up their shots. Affirmative, I have a clear shot. The voice of the other man came clearly through his earpiece. Fire on my mark. Naruto needed only about a minute before he had the perfect idea and was just about to announce it to his impatient friend, and she was a friend now, no matter how much she denied it, when a most unexpected event occurred. A very large caliber sniper round crashed into his head and bounced off, snapping his head backwards from the unexpected force of it. Something that should be noted about Naruto's body was that it was for all intents and purposes impervious to damage, unless he willed it otherwise, and the only time he lowered this absolute invulnerability was in a fight to make it interesting. After all, what kind of fight was it if you couldn't bleed? The perks of godhood. Naruto aimed a contemplative look at the distant sniper that had previously slipped past his attention, because he had quite frankly not been paying any attention. He actually didn't pay attention to his surroundings most of the time. It was no fun if you always knew what was going around you. Looks like we'll be postponing our fight for just a few minutes longer, but you're free to join me as I punish Manaka for being an idiot again. It's his fault that the fight has been delayed after all. As he spoke this, he also took hold of the man's head with his mind and twisted it around to break his neck. Usually he disdained killing in such a fashion, but he really didn't feel like going over to stab the guy personally. Kerasuba had been surprised by the sudden sniper shot, then pissed at yet another delay, and now she was intrigued, but a question arose in her mind. What if it wasn't Manaka? It was Manaka. How can you be so sure? Because little crow, it was Manaka even if it wasn't Manaka. At the same time, Xana's hand suddenly lashed out at impossible speed and snatched the bullet right out of the air. She'd sensed the killing intent focused solely on her some time ago and sped up her perception of time just before the assassin had fired. "Mistress?" Akitsu asked with concealed alarm, having turned swiftly as she heard the bullet going through the window. Yashima ran into the room right after, having also heard the noise. An assassin with a sniper rifle. Silenced, high-caliber, armor-piercing rounds. Xana said, idly observing the bullet. It was very large, spiked instead of rounded, made of extremely dense material, and rather heavy. No doubt another of Manaka's attempts to take back control. Negligently, she fed the bullet back at the sniper who had moved elsewhere by now, propelling it at only half of its previous speed to prevent overpenetration. Just like Naruto, she refused to kill by accident. "Are you going to go after Manaka now?" Yashima asked curiously. "No, it is my husband's turn to play with that idiot." Manaka was waiting anxiously for news of a successful assassination, not that he would admit to being anxious to anyone. As the game master, he had to maintain a veneer of confident aloofness and regal authority. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" Manaka spun around in a whirl of white cloth and beheld a most disturbing sight. It was the very man that was supposed to be assassinated, and even worse, he'd been found in his new and super secure hidden office. Had he always been that big, or did it just seem that way in person? Oddly enough, he had Kerasuba with him as well. "How did you find me here, Naruto-san?" "Odd mode." Naruto paused to loudly crack his neck to one side. "Mother. Now, are you ready for the consequences of your actions?" "Kerasuba, if you could please remove Naruto-san," Manaka said, hiding just how nervous he was. Considering his suspicions that Kerasuba had in fact lost to the Horned Man once already, he was grasping at straws here. "No, thanks to you our fight was delayed again. I'm just here to see what he does to you." The Black Seikirei refused. "But you're on the disciplinary squad," Manaka protested. "I quit," she replied dismissively, to Manaka's horror. In the end, her loyalty to MBI had always been paper-thin, and her bond to Natsuo was so weak that it could barely even be called a bond. All it took to subvert her was the promise of good battles, and that was something that Naruto could very easily provide. At this point, Naruto had produced an old-fashioned razor blade and inspected it critically before looking towards Manaka. "That's a lot of hair you've got there, so I'm going to do you a favor and shave it off. Mind you, I've never used one of these before, and I've made the blade very, very sharp, so try not to move too much." Several minutes later, Manaka had his head shaved bald and was sporting quite a few bloody cuts across his scalp. One of them had been deep enough that Naruto had needed to heal it quickly to prevent constant bleeding. "Are you sure this is all you're going to do to him?" Kerasuba asked in disappointment, much to Manaka's alarm. "It seems pretty weak compared to what your wife did." "Well, my wife can be quite a bit meaner than me, but I figured you'd want to get your own shots in too, so I restrained myself." Kerasuba blinked before a grin slowly spread across her face, and she took her sword out. "Now remember, no killing. Xana and I figure that he probably still has at least 1 or 2 acts of stupidity in him." "Well, I never did get to cut your balls off." "Well, this is certainly a lot different than the last time we were here," Kerasuba commented as she looked around Naruto's personal dimension. Instead of a freezing cold castle high in the mountains, this time it was a lush jungle, dense and humid. She could already feel sweat prickling along her skin because of the heat and soggy air. The trees were massive and had branches that were more than thick enough to fight on. The foliage was also so thick that visibility was going to be close to zero if you made even a few leaps to adjacent trees. "That's not the only thing that's going to be different," Naruto said, calling Kerasuba's attention back to himself. She turned just fast enough to see his sword transforming into a larger than average naginata with a black pole that she just knew was going to be indestructible, and a long thick blade with backwards facing spikes along the back of it. "I've never personally used one of these before, but I've always been curious what it was like to fight with a palm. This is as good a time as any to try it out," Naruto explained and twirled his new weapon around a few times to get a feel for it. "How the hell did your sword just change shape?" Kerasuba demanded. "Like Kusanagi is a sacred instrument of the heavens, it can do many things," Naruto declared grandly. "Or if you want the technical answer. That's how." Kerasuba's face turned into a glare and she released all of the pent-up aggression that had been building up in her for a good long while by launching herself at him with a vicious swing. Naruto blocked by placing the pole of his naginata into the path of her swing, but Kerasuba surprised him by sliding her blade along it, forcing him to quickly let go with one hand or lose fingers. Off-balanced and unfamiliar with his weapon, he was placed entirely on the defensive as the black Seikirei continued with her assault. Hashirama had had only a passing familiarity with this weapon type, leaving him mostly on his own. It was good enough that he was able to keep blocking as he retreated for the next few minutes. Eventually he got a good enough feel for how the weapon handled that he was able to do more than just block with the pole. Getting an idea, he jumped up to one of the 3 branches and harassed the pursuing Kerasuba with short slashing and stabbing attacks. The massive reach of the palm prevented her from instantly counter-attacking, and the narrow tree root prevent all attempts to flank him. Getting an idea, Naruto started rapidly spinning his weapon in a figure-8 pattern and advanced towards her. Scowling, Kerasuba chose to cut through the branch they were standing on instead of attempting to attack him through that. Since she was the one standing on the part of it closer to the tree, Naruto went plummeting towards the ground, though he jumped off the falling branch and on a new one. Kerasuba blasted several air blades towards him, which he easily countered with an air vortex created by spinning his naginata, looking amused. "You're never going to tag me with one of those little crow." Kerasuba panted lightly and discarded her Haori. It was too damn hot in this jungle, she already felt terribly sticky under her clothing, and all this activity certainly wasn't helping to cool her down. She glared up at the smugly smirking blonde, who didn't look winded or bothered by the heat in the slightest, he wasn't even sweating. Suddenly she got an idea as she realized that the narrow branches favored his much longer weapon, even if he was less skilled with it than with a sword. Naruto's eyebrows rose when Kerasuba charged right at the base of the tree, on whose branch he was standing on, and cut it clean through. When he jumped to another tree, she just cut through that one as well. After the 6th tree fell and something of a clearing full of gigantic felled trees had been formed, Naruto figured that she wasn't going to stop imitating a lumberjack until he got down on the ground. With that in mind, he jumped down on the ground staring evenly at the panting and smirking Kerasuba. She launched herself at him without warning once again, but he'd expected something like that and had no trouble blocking her. They fought across the ground, both being careful of their footing and rapidly destroying the massive trunks of the felled trees. Kerasuba was frustrated. Naruto had gained proficiency with his weapon entirely too fast for her liking, and he now had little trouble holding her off. She knew that a naginata had enough similarities with a sword that a master of one might be able to learn the other with only minimal difficulty, but it was still irritating. On top of that, the climate was sapping her strength faster and faster as her body overheated. Something, she irritably realized, that Naruto had likely planned on to give himself an edge while he was yet unfamiliar with the naginata. Considering the fact that the temperature didn't seem to be affecting in the slightest, she felt quite sure that her assumption was correct. Not that she was going to utter a peep over any of her grievances. Nothing was ever fair and she wouldn't complain like a whiny kid over the fact that he deliberately placed her in a disadvantageous situation. He was already getting more aggressive now that he was more familiar with the workings of his new weapon, prodding at her defenses and forcing her to react to him instead of the other way around. Even worse, he'd figured out how to incorporate his martial arts into his attacks, sneaking a kick or punch on her any time that he was close enough. And then suddenly, an infuriatingly simple but entirely unexpected problem arose that hindered her further. Her hair, sticky with sweat, slapped over her eyes and limited her visibility in the middle of her swing. Naruto took advantage of her botched attack instantly, trapping her Nadachi in the spikes of his naginata and twisted and pulled it in an attempt to rip it out of her hands. Kerasuba recovered from the momentary irritation quickly, but not quickly enough to save her sword from getting caught in the spikes and was forced to step forward or lose it. Naruto had another course of action open to him now however and took it. The black Seikirei had stepped within range of his feet and he lashed out with a direct blow that would strike her chest if she didn't evade it. Unable to free her sword in time, Kerasuba could either let go of her sword or attempt to move to the side. Naturally she moved to the side, but this weakened her hold further and gave Naruto all the advantage he needed to twist the sword away from her hands and send it sailing into the undergrowth. Naruto grinned at her and threw the kusanagi into one of the fallen trees, impaling it there. Then he proceeded to give Kerasuba a gesture that was known and hated by all. The upturned palm and come at me gesture. Scowling and panting harshly now, Kerasuba got into a martial arts stance of her own and attacked. She was primarily a sword user, but her hand-to-hand was plenty good enough to take down just about any fist-type Seikirei out there, since none of them were single digits. Benitsubasa was actually the only one that she knew of that might give her a little bit of trouble. Well. There was also Musubi, but the scatterbrained number 88 wasn't quite there yet. The sword that Naruto had made for her. A beautiful weapon far surpassing her old one in quality. Thoughts of Naruto brought up a confusing jumble of emotions and impressions. She was angry at him for the way he'd played her, made her pant like a wanton slut that couldn't wait to get taken. More than that, she was angry at him for the way that he'd gotten her so turned on that her self-control had shattered to pieces and left her in control of her body. But she was also happy. He wasn't like Mia, who'd cast her sword aside in favor of a broom and seemed content to sweep her porch and pretend that she didn't have an ocean of blood on her hands. He wasn't like Hume, prattling on about love and sacrificing her life to save one tiny, weak little Seikirei. He'd always be there, always be strong and willing to give her the battle she wanted so much. She needed to think, and she couldn't do it here, where there were so many people already and where he'd be so close. Decision made, she got dressed, belted on her sword and leaped out the window. She'd have to find somewhere to stay since she doubted that MBI would be bankrolling her anymore, especially in light of the fact that she'd castrated its president not very long ago, but that was hardly an issue. She knew how to care of herself. Naruto's gold-orange gaze was contemplative as he observed Kerasuba jumping at a leisurely pace across the city rooftops. "You'll be back, little crow, the answers aren't out there and you're too confused to find them yourself," he murmured to himself. He was actually a clone, the original being busy cuddling his wife, the lucky bastard. Xana would be quite put out with him if he left their bed so that he could stare after Kerasuba and make ominous statements to no one in particular. He made frequent use of clones to observe the situation in the city and break up any Seikirei battles they encountered. Occasionally he also had to kill one, such as number 13 Amabane the other night. That little punk had been a right lunatic and his Ashikabi had been such a shy and weak-willed girl that she wasn't capable of asserting any authority despite the fact that she was supposed to have all the power in that relationship. In light of all that, he'd killed him and burned the body to nothing, leaving the tearful girl to go home. Ishima's situation had thankfully been unique apparently, otherwise there would already be several extra Seikirei inhabiting rooms in the hotel, though he knew there were a couple of other Ashikabi who would be losing their lives soon enough. The most notable of them were the so-called Ashikabi of the East and South, an idiotic moniker if ever there was one. Neither one of them thought of their Seikirei as anything other than tools or collectible items respectively, but they weren't actively abused. This was fortunate since it allowed him to act slowly instead of instantly crashing the party and making a bloody mess out of them. Each of them had a few psychos in their group of Seikirei that would need to be dealt with, but the situation was stable for now and without Manaka as a factor to screw everything up, it would stay stable. The only thing Manaka was good for was a deterrent to prevent any outside forces from attempting any kidnappings. The rest of the world wasn't aware of the fact that he and Xana were here or how much more dangerous they were than MBI, so Manaka still had that one use. Well, that and is a source of amusement. The only thing that the mad CEO had been right about was that Seikirei should stay in the city limits for now. Kerasuba might have been wrong in her assumption that he needed the Seikirei to stay in the city, but it would make it easier for certain, which was why he'd placed discreet seals at every exit that would give any Seikirei or bonded Ashikabi a serious case of confusion and make them turn right back around. Devious perhaps, but he didn't feel like slaughtering any foreign search and capture teams that wanted to get their paws on a Seikirei or two. Uzumaki-san. The cool, polite voice made him smile slightly. This one was so much like Kakashi that it was ridiculous. All he needed was a different haircut, a scar over his left eye, and the eye itself to be replaced with a Sharingan. "Hamura?" he greeted back. "May I ask what you are doing here?" The fire Seikirei asked warily, not too shocked that his name was known. "Just keeping an eye on one of my projects," he answered, gesturing to the barely visible Kerasuba in the distance. Hamura peered at the silver-haired figure in the distance, sucking in a breath when he recognized a disciplinary squad Haori over her shoulders. "Kerasuba?" he hissed. "Yes, quite the interesting one. More like a bloodthirsty psychopath." Hamura scoffed. "Look beyond the darkness and you will find a new shadow," Naruto responded ominously. "What?" Hamura asked, frowning in confusion as he tried to decipher that cryptic statement. "It's the middle of the night and I feel like making portentous statements," he explained. "So what? Beneath her bloodthirsty psychopath persona she's also a sadist." Naruto snickered at the sarcastic question. He wasn't going to try to make Kerasuba seem cuddly and approachable because she really wasn't, but willful ignorance was rarely a good thing. "I thought you'd appreciate her sadistic side, considering she castrated Manaka less than 6 hours ago." After Hamura's instinctive wince of male sympathy, an unstoppable grin bloomed on his face, even as he questioned the event. "But she's on the disciplinary squad, why would she do that?" "You're behind the times, Sparky, there is no more disciplinary squad. I've unwinged both Heihain and Kerasuba today, and Heihain is already living with me. Kerasuba went off to do some soul searching, but I expect that she'll be back in a few days, probably pissed off and demanding answers." Now Hamura was stunned speechless, enough that he didn't even register the nickname. This guy was seriously not screwing around. "But enough about that, how's your core doing?" Once again, Hamura was thrown severely off balance. casually mentioning his little problem, which was actually a really huge problem, as if it was common knowledge would do that to a guy. What do you know about my core? Hamura asked defensively. Unstable